Goody gumdrops. All right. So I'll just do an intro and
Cool.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Newspace podcast. I am your host Johnny Vedmore and I'm here today with Tzvi and Frank. Man, I know that I didn't pronounce it properly, but come on, I mean I gave it a go. Tzvi?
It's like
Is that good?
It's like a tsetse fly.
Tzvi. Tzvi. So
Yeah.
I got to say it basically Chinese then you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Tzvi. Hello, Tzvi. Yes.
It's like nuts. It's like nuts. Try to say the "th" part first.
Try to say the end. At the end of exactly.
Oh man,
not to be confused with these nuts.
Saying the end of nuts. No, let's not get into nuts at the beginning of this show. And anyway, I think it means deer, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Your name. So that's
correct.
That's a nice one. So
yeah, especially when you get emails from Israeli businessmen and they Google Translate, dear. You have not paid us. You have not paid us the money you owe us.
Yeah. That's always the way. Yeah, well, they shoot down Bambi, nowadays. Okay, well, these fine gentlemen of the nation of Israel. Do you class yourself up as a podcast, or is it just like an entity, or is it the Nation of Israel podcast?
Truth Fanatics is the podcast. Nation of Israel is like I guess you want to call it. An entity umbrella. I don't know what you want to call it, but
yeah, that was a sneaky little acquisition to get that name round the place. The Nation of Israel, really.
I don't know.
Nation of Israel was first, and then it started out Nation of Israel, and then later on.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, you can find the guys on Substack, nationofisrael.substack.com. And we're going to have a conversation today, which is, of course, going to be difficult, weird. It's weird. It's a bit weird for me because, as someone who hasn't grown up as a Jew in a place like Israel or within Jewish communities, I am obviously going to be to a certain extent insensitive about stuff and not realize about stuff. In the same way, I've got a strong left-wing socialist background. My dad was a steel worker. My mum worked in like the NHS and socialist, sort of like washing test tubes in the socialist hospital system. I got very much brought up on the left wing. It was always about free Palestine, stuff like that. I've always seen the underdog as the people to fight for, of course, and that kind of narrative comes out in this story. And of course, what happened less than a week ago was, jaw-dropping. You have your instant reaction. For me, I had my instant reaction to it, and my instant reaction is always that's what happens when an entity like the Israeli government, using a very, very strong army, surround and kind of like occupy a people to the point where they're crushed into an area that you're bound to see some sort of schism come out of that. But that is very simplistic. I know that is very simplistic because there's loads of nuance to this. And the fact is that I think both sides, it can be said, both sides have an apocalyptic twist to it. There's a religious background there between the two, where they do both believe that there is going to be some form of reckoning at the end. I mean, you guys are obviously very spiritual. You're very knowledgeable about Judaism in general. Me less so, of course. But obviously from the outside, what we see is like a lot of religion and not being able to understand or connect with the passion. Could say connect with the passion. So I don't know. I've thought about this when I was thinking about how to start this. There's no easy way to start a conversation where it's like cross boundaries and cross borders. But you guys seem like both have the ability to communicate And also don't mind if you say something that someone else may object to. And that's really important for a conversation. So I suppose I'd start off by asking you guys what that was like to find out about what happened.
You want to start, Frank? So I was telling you before the show, Johnny, I was in the holiday, and it was like in synagogue in the morning. I guess it was Saturday morning, and there's a break in between the prayers, and I just heard some guy, people getting coffee, and then some guy just started saying how there were soldiers captured. There's rockets. There's a bunch of rockets, a lot of rockets, like so many rockets that even the Iron Dome can't catch them all, and then soldiers are captured. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so how, if they're captured, let's say, because he said a few, so I'm thinking like 5, 10 maximum. So I'm thinking, okay, here we go. The Israeli government's now gonna let 5,000, 10,000 of these whatever Frank likes to call them sub chimps. We'll get into that later. Out, and here we go. More terror coming, from those guys, because they go right back to terror. And then over the course of the day, you start getting information from some friends who were using their cell phones on the holiday on Shabbat, because I wasn't on my phone that day, and you just start hearing like bits and pieces of like Auschwitz or mini Auschwitz or Babi Yar or all the rest of it. And immediately, like, I'm the kind of person, like you just mentioned, you feel things, all this stuff. Like, dude, I'm what they call an empath. You probably know what that is. And I could feel stuff from like 6,000 miles away. So I'm feeling like the pain of, and it sounds like cliche, it sounds all kind of romanticized, but a lot of rabbis talk about it, how people feel kind of like the land. I felt the pain of the land, and I felt the pain of people. And I was just like, and it's a happy kind of holiday. People, it's Simchat Torah, so we're supposed to be dancing with the Torah. We're supposed to be drinking the night before. Also there was some drinking going on, and I found myself kind of like, I guess, trying to kind of transcend it, but then every so often my mind goes back. It's the whole thing's in the back of my mind, and I'm just like thinking. I didn't even know all the details, but I'm just like thinking about like potential Auschwitz kind of situation. It was really like a crazy dichotomy in my mind and in my heart, because, and then you have like the rabbis are saying how like, let's hope everything's okay, and we're going to try to like, be happy, what they call be b'simcha, despite everything that happened. So just over the course of that day, just like stuff going on, and then like and it's a 2-day holiday here in America as opposed to 1 day in Israel. So you go into the evening and there's like this after party and people are singing and drinking, and I'm just like, how are people, and like other people are finding out stuff, and I'm just like, how the hell are people even like doing this? I don't know what level they're on. Frank and I talk about it all the time, that there's like some people that are on some level, no matter what, meaning like they know kind of, because we say like everything is from God, right? God allows these things, these kind of things, or God allows X, God allows Y. And there's like, certain people that are on some level, usually it's like these big rabbis who are just able to kind of just say, there's nothing but God, everything is for the best, literally everything's good, however, good, and that's it. And they could just be singing and right through, they could be on a train to literally a camp and sing on that train. There's those kind of people. I'm not one of those people, and I was just kind of beside myself for the rest of the holiday. And then you come out of it and you find, and then you get, you start kind of getting the news, you turn your phone on, and it's just like, my first reaction was two things. My reaction, two components, two reactions, two thoughts. The first thing was, this is the most fortified border, if not the world, and for sure in Israel. You have about 9 or 10 things that they do down there, to where if a friend of mine said, if a caterpillar farts, there's jeeps on it, right? Mm-hmm. Which means that, again, we'll get into this, but this was straight up either allowed, or you want to use the term inside job. But for sure it was allowed. Who allowed it? We'll get into that. Yeah. The second thing I thought about was like, wow, Israel pulled out of Gaza, and again, we can get into this discussion as well. We pulled out of Gaza, out of a place called Gush Katif in 2005. It was Ariel Sharon, Mr. Right Wing, Mr. Lion of Israel, what they called him, a bunch of people in the Knesset, and also George W. Bush and other entities. We removed Jews from their homes. We were praying that these people were going to make something out of this. We gave them greenhouses, all the rest of it. Nothing but rockets for 18 years. Our government kind of just signing deals with whomever to, block these rockets with Iron Dome for 18 years. The irony is that we pulled religious Jews out of that place. And the people who were attacked were the old-style socialist, secular kibbutzniks who founded the state of Israel, who have been on the warpath against religious Jews. And here's the irony, another kicker, now we have unity between all the groups after having horrible discord to the point of on the brink of civil war right before this. When a guy, what is it, a week before that, on Yom Kippur, some guy harassed people praying. So all these thoughts are in my head, and I'm just like, goodness gracious, but then the thing that kind of, was dominating in my mind was that I couldn't let go that this was allowed. This was allowed by our government. I started having all these, I'm like, who could have done this? Well, one theory is, let's say Bibi working with the globalists, they want to have a war. Let's say he's blackmailed, right? Another theory is left-wing generals in the military who want to take this new government, this religious troglodyte government down. Another theory is Bibi himself. He needs a pretext to go in to finally finish the job with Hamas. And I've just kind of been bouncing these things around, obviously, expressing them. People call me conspiracy theorist. People who are, pro-Israel call me conspiracy theorist, because if you don't have fealty, towards the government, then I'm against unity. Right now is the time for unity. Right now is not the time for these things. I'm like, when is the time? Right? We're gonna do this afterwards. The government's not gonna do the full investigation. They're gonna do the same thing they did with the vaccines. They're gonna do. We investigated this. We found nothing wrong, or we found here's the culprit. They just
Warren Commission, 9/11 Commission. We know how it goes.
They threw us a bone with this Shabak guy, who came out a couple days later. Oh, it was my fault. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. It's your fault. And do you care to give us any details about that? How nine forms of security on that border were all down. I had people, Iranians hacked it. Any proof? Can you show me anything? Iranians hacked. Oh, they trained for this for about a year. Okay, I know they trained for about a year, but it doesn't matter. This is not a professional army. These are, you know what I'm saying? These are glorified gang members. So those are my thoughts in the beginning, and but then I started looking at all the the graphic scenes and all the rest of it. Listen, man. Again, these are all kind of things, bullet points I'm giving you now, but we can get into in detail. Frank may be better than I can. As far as the Torah is concerned, as far as Judaism is concerned, we have this entity that the Torah talks about called Amalek. Amalek is a nation that attacked the Jewish people in the desert. They had a calling card. The calling card was to attack the vulnerable, to attack the back of the camp, the stragglers. Children, old people, in this case, it would be disabled, women, no offense to any ladies watching. And so you're commanded, the Torah, God commands us to kill them. In every generation, it says, in every generation you're going to be faced with them, you have to decimate them. And we actually have a story from the Bible with King Saul, who didn't finish off the king. It was Agag. It was a king of the Amalekite nation, didn't finish him off. We had mercy for them, and we paid a heavy price. And listen, I'm not about people are talking about the people of Gaza, all this other stuff. Listen, this has to be handled. If we're just gonna let this off the hook, we're gonna let this entity, at the very least, the entity to continue, we're gonna get much worse than what we got. You're gonna see. I can't even describe to you what you might see the next time, and there will be a next time. So those are my opening thoughts, I guess you could say, on the topic. Frank, you look like you want to say a lot.
Just before Frank comes in, as you said, there was like a dichotomy in your heart and your head. You mean like kind of like the split of the rationale between the two, or do you like so many things going on? You know,
the economy was, I was trying to, it was a holiday, and I was trying to really, there's this idea, especially like Chabad, Hasidic Jews like to are very big on this idea. When something like this is happening, they like to they say it's we should do our best, we should do everything we can to transcend everything and to bring light into the world. Despite the darkness, we have to bring light into the world, like as it's happening, like literally you should sing in a train car going to Auschwitz, which as completely insane as that sounds. So in my head there was just that dichotomy, and it's something that I never, it's something that never had to kind of play itself out in this way in my life, in such an intense way. Again, we always hear stories of our holy men in Jewish history that literally were able to do this, and we're always like, wow, we don't know how they're able to do this, and we're not of that generation. And now you start to understand that, like, wow, something is thrust upon you, and you have to be in a certain state of mind. You have to put yourself in a state of mind, and it's just like you almost feel guilty. You almost feel guilty celebrating. You almost want, you want to stay home and just kind of be in bed and whatever.
This kind of makes me think of a conversation I had on the last podcast with Parallel Mike, who was talking about taking away all the limitations. If you're going to be successful at anything, you've got to delimit your mind, and that is, of course, the spiritual and religious way to get to that action of delimiting and be able to have the confidence that you can go further and get to that higher level. What was your experience, Frank?
So I've been thinking about how to bring this perspective to an audience that most likely has never heard or is even familiar with the existence of what we would call the real Jewish perspective. Because people think, they look at the Israeli government and they think that represents the Jewish perspective. Now, I know what that sounds like. That sounds like something that sounds similar to something where you have these Hasidic Jews who dress up, these morons who wear, the Palestinian keffiyehs and say Judaism isn't Zionism. They're liars. Judaism is Zionism, but nobody knows what actual Zionism is. There's so much layers of shit on top of reality that we have to uncover, and I'm going to try to do it as fast as possible. Okay? People don't even know what.
Take your time. I don't mind listening.
People don't even know what a Jew is. Now, before I even explain that, let me explain what real Zionism is. So King David was, you could call him the first famous Zionist. He founded the city of Jerusalem, and the mountain, the Temple Mount, that's in Hebrew, Zion. There's that sound again, like his name, Tzvi, Zion. That's where Zion comes from. And it represents the Temple Mount, and it represents God's presence, which is called in Hebrew the Shekhinah, and Christians, I know, they call it the Shekinah, but it represents this presence that God uses to interact with mankind. Okay, and so the desire to be in that presence, and be in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, and by extension Israel, that is what Zionism is. It's a religious idea that is synonymous with the Jewish religion and the Jewish soul. Now, as leftists are, commonly do, they take ideas and they co-opt them. They take them for themselves, redefine them, and use these terms. And that's a very common thing that leftists have done all throughout history. Now, when I say leftists, I want to clarify what I mean by that. To me, leftists historically have been the followers of Plato. Everybody's heard about that philosopher Plato. You ask somebody, "Oh, you ever heard of Plato?" "Yeah, he was a philosopher." You know anything he said? Some Greek stuff, right? That's what you will get. So, and I'm not making fun of those people, because I only recently, relatively speaking, in the last 15 years of my life, became familiar with it. I ignored it most of my life. So for those who may not be familiar, like, communism is Platonic. That's Plato's idea of there's been tweaks here and there, but most of history has been, you can define it as followers of Plato trying to establish Plato's republic in one form or another all over the earth. So that's what Alexander the Great was doing when he was trying to spread Hellenism throughout the Greek Empire. That's what he was, Plato's, guy. He was Plato's conqueror, right? That's what it was about. That's what he was trying to do. And then in one form or another throughout history, up until this very day. In fact, it's the followers of Plato who were trying to depopulate the earth, poison the entire world with death shots and all sorts of man-made catastrophes, political and biological and economic. And so people have heard, like, there's famous entities that people don't know all fall into this category. Like, the Illuminati, by the way, that they were literally devout followers of Plato and Plato's religion, by the way. I wish people would not only get in touch with or get familiar with Plato's Republic and his views on how the world should be run. I wish people would become familiar with his religious views, because they are absolutely synonymous. They don't understand that the followers of Plato have a very spiritual task in their mind. It's spiritual. It's not good, but it's spiritual. Okay, so that was kind of like I think that was important as a foundation to this, because Jews are historically have been the ultimate enemy of the Platonics, because our religion is the exact opposite. It is literally, like, to them, nothing could be more horrifying. It's the main obstacle to establishing their enlightened republic. Okay, and to really understand this, you don't have to take my word for it. You can, if you study the subject of Gnosticism, right, which academics do study it, right? There are university level professors who study it. Many of them themselves will say Gnosticism, which is Plato's, essentially these are synonymous terms with Plato, is anti-Judaism. So we have to explain quickly why that is. Okay, we'll get to that. But so the relation, that's my little boy. You hear him? Sorry about that.
I don't mind it. I don't think anybody will mind that. No one will mind.
All right. Okay. He's gonna get a bottle.
They'll possibly encourage it.
Yeah. So, all right. So basically, we have, like, the religious Jewish view of the world, which has been the basic Jewish view of the world until about 1850. And what I'm going to tell you right now has been the majority of Jews historically and in the world have had this view and feeling about themselves, their relationship to God, and their relationship to the land of Israel. Okay, so Israel is our land for eternity, and there's no negotiations, there's no compromises on that. It's historic. We don't even care if other people understand that it's historically established and it was paid for, like, multiple times. Imagine somebody breaking into your car, stealing your stereo, if people remember from the 80s when you had stereo, like the car radio, right? So that, people used to
The
break into
track.
yeah, they would steal your radio, and then later they'd come and try to sell it back to you, right? This happened. This was very common in Brooklyn. I saw it with my own eyes. These thugs trying to sell my father's. That's a separate story. So that's what Israel's like. It's documented in the Hebrew scripture, how it was given by God, okay, and how Abraham paid for it, and many times, and even in recent history. But that doesn't really matter to a religious Jew, because when you start talking about that kind of stuff, it sounds like you're trying to justify it to someone, to a person. But from the basic Jewish perspective is we don't need to bother to justify it to a person at all. We have a relationship with God, and He gave us that land. Okay. So that's that. And it's the same thing with this whole abomination, which is this expression that's used all the time. We support Israel's right to defend itself. That's like if somebody were to come up to you and say, I support Michael's right to have testicles. And Michael's like, wait a minute, when was this up for discussion? I didn't realize that this was something that was being debated, among my peers. Right? That's what it's like. I don't give them.
Have you actually met Mike? I mean,
I'm not picking on Mike. I just didn't want to say anybody's name that's here presently. I should have said Archibald. That's not a very common name.
Speaking of nuts, yeah.
I should have said like Heinrich or something like that. I don't know. Okay. Sorry, Mike. Wasn't talking about you specifically. Sorry, all right. But that's what it's like. It's funny that the angel Michael is the angel of Israel, but that's probably another conversation. But anyway, so sorry, Mike. Anyway, so the point is, it's of course everybody has the right to defend themselves. Why is it that? What does that even mean? Anyway, so the point is that I guess we can't go through all of history. Let's go through the past 300 years very quickly. The past 300 years, there have been waves and waves of Jews from Europe, religious Jews, moving to Israel for religious reasons, establishing farms and villages there for the last 300 years regularly. Okay, it was a completely desolate land, and the only signs of life that you would find would be these villages. Okay, these little tiny. And essentially, for the past 300 years, before the state of Israel was established, essentially you had these religious Hasidic Jews creating the infrastructure. So, according to the Torah, there is a minority view that opposes this, but it's basically irrelevant. But according to the Torah, the Jews are allowed to have a state before the coming of Mashiach, before the king arrives. This is our religious perspective, okay, for those who might not have any familiarity. So, just the basic idea is, the full kingdom of Israel will be reestablished when the Messiah comes. He's going to be a descendant of King David. We'll get into that some other time. But until that time, we are allowed to have a Jewish government in Israel. But it has to be one that is guided by Torah principles, by Torah law. Okay. And what we got was the exact opposite. Okay. So what happened was like this. Those generations of migrations of Jews from mostly from Eastern Europe, but also from some of the Arab countries coming to Israel, living there and establishing settlements, farms or whatever you call that. That word, that's a loaded term now, settlement. Okay. So basically that was very much opposed by secular movements in Europe and actually worldwide, mostly in Europe. So the socialists, which have been around, you go back, 150 years when socialism was called the Bund der Gerechten in Germany. right? There was the World Communist Party, which was founded in Germany by the Illuminati, or the next generation of the Illuminati, whatever.
Go on.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I was just thinking, are you talking about Willy Munzenberg?
Well, there's
1917 and the
oh no, I'm talking about like 18.
But early,
There was a communist uprising in Austria in 1848. So this goes back to early 1800s, and I think they have. I don't remember when it officially became the World Communist Party, which was found.
That Comintern. That was 1917, and that was Willy Munzenberg. So
okay, so I guess like maybe 70 years prior to that, they called it the Bund der Gerechten.
Okay, right. Okay.
So they established. So they had all sorts of activities where they essentially, they wanted to destroy, as Platonics do. They need to create. There's 3 levels of revolution that they have to create: religious revolution, economic, and then political revolution. Okay, so they established departments to deal with all of those things. So they had in Europe, they had departments on creating operatives to destroy the religions of Europe, Christianity and Judaism. So they got, they had specific agents that got to work on destroying Protestants and Catholics. And the Jesuits had a lot to do with destroying Catholicism and stuff like that.
I just want to say, Frank, in the Soviet Union, they had this thing called Yevsektia, which was actually
the Jewish
Jewish section, which basically it was actually a bunch of guys with Jewish last names walking around, basically shutting down any Jewish life, any synagogues, anything to do with religion.
Yeah, because there was around that time there was pogroms, wasn't there, that pushed lots of Russian Jews out of Russia and into.
That's something else.
That's something else. I'm talking about when Lenin got kicking.
Right.
And Jews were. Again, this goes back to, this is an entity we can talk about, also called the Erev Rav, which I think we mentioned last time, and these guys actually like to help our enemies, like Hamas and other people. So
because they're Platonics. The next holiday coming, Hanukkah, is literally about religious Jews fighting. It was a civil war primarily in Israel between Jews who keep the traditional faith and those who wanted to bring Hellenism and establish it as the main way of life. Because there's always been a section, we call those people the Erev Rav, and we've been having a civil war even before Hanukkah, but Hanukkah was like one of the highlights, it was of this conflict. Okay, so the communists in the 1800s, they established these breakaway cults in order to take religious Jews and to pull them away from their religious hogwash gradually. So they had 2 approaches. One of them was called Reformed Judaism, and the founders of these of Reformed Judaism were literally Bundegerechten agents, and they were actually funded by Illuminati and the financiers behind the Illuminati, which were actually the Prussian royalty. They're the ones who were funding the whole project. Okay, and so they found Jewish guys who were of similar, who liked Platonic philosophy. So they wanted to, they had similar agendas. So they started working with these Jewish guys, and that's what we call the Haskalah movement in Europe, Central Europe, and in Eastern Europe, to specifically to remove Jews from their traditional mindset. Okay, so that they would be better. This really, if you want to understand this discussion, it's
funny. I was just going to say it's interesting how during this time there is a lot of different efforts from different angles to remove traditional values from people. It's something that's continued and morphed over time, but it was definitely something that in my research I've seen during the 1800s, especially, where there was Nietzsche and stuff helped push people into this idea where you could start to separate ideology away from religion. You just there is no God anymore. That's where we were going.
Well,
sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. Essentially, it was motivated by just they have another religion that they felt was better. It wasn't removing religion. It was removing people from the wrong religion. according to them. That's
Yeah.
really what it was. And but so basically, and they tried to do this to everyone. They attacked Christians. They had people who were, who were involved in that, and then they had a Jewish section that dealt with the Jews. They had a lot of problems in Eastern Europe, and that's kind of created this like funny kind of hatred between German Jews. Sorry, my beard's malfunctioning. Anyway, so that's essentially what was going on, briefly. But if you want to understand this discussion, you got to read Voltaire, and was it Mirabeau, the Jacobins, people who were involved in the French Revolution.
Brutal. If you want brutal, there's some brutal stuff going on there.
Yeah. So essentially, you could find the origins of the communists and the National Socialists in the Jacobins, because everybody had some interest in the Jews. Okay, and so one side.
Well, that's also the first time that the word terrorist started to be used as well, which is quite intriguing.
That's right. And it was.
Listen, can I just say one thing? On a simple level at that time, besides what you're saying, Frank, in terms of the Bund, I think a lot of Jews got sucked into these ideologies and away from religion because they got it into their heads that, we have this thing called the emancipation. Jews are allowed in the cities. They're allowed in society. They're allowed in, this is 1800s now, or maybe even late 17. They were allowed in universities. Then you have the Enlightenment. So how are we going to solve this anti-Semitism problem? We're just going to join society. We're gonna blend in. Sounds familiar? I mean, take a look at America.
That was what the discussion was. So one side, Jacobins, they said, let's emancipate them. We'll give them all the rights, and then they'll assimilate by themselves and problem solve. The other side's like, we got to kill them all. That was the discussion. Please, if you don't believe me, just read.
No, I did. I mean, I did the research on like blood libels and other things that were going on in the region. And there's so much going on. As you're talking, there's a lot of different things that make sense during that period, especially with people. When I track people down, like it was Schwab's father, Klaus Schwab's grandfather. I think his name was Wilhelm Gottlieb Schwab, but he had a Jewish name in there as well. It was Jacob, but he didn't go by that, and he didn't like to get like even look a little bit Jewish. I think he was like, take it out of your name. But then if you look back, I think that they changed it. A lot of Jews, because it was illegal to be in there around that area and Jewish for a long time. You would just be ejected from what was Oberschwabia. A lot of the Jews just changed their name, so they had to assimilate. So when you're saying
how did Schwab's father get past the SS?
That's amazing because I think it's because his grandfather, so Schwab's father's father, had gone to Switzerland, renounced his German citizenship, got married in Switzerland, came back to Germany and got back his citizenship, and that allowed him to possibly change his name. But Eugen Schwab, Klaus Schwab's father, got married to a Jew. His first wife was actually Jewish, and he had children with her, and she emigrated to America in 1938 and put her nationality down as Hebrew rather than German. So it was pretty clear that the Nazis, when they wanted to, they could just, it didn't really matter, did it? I mean, if you had someone who could do the job,
because they were Germans, literally blonde-haired giant Germans, right, who had one Jew like 400 years in their history, who and they they went to they sent them to the gas chambers. I don't understand how that, but anyway.
No, I understand.
It would be a miracle if that happened. Then it would be a miracle. But miracles happen too. It's weird things like that have happened. So I suppose. But to make a long story short, so the secular or socialist or Platonic, people who came from the Jews, who were involved in this effort to destroy religion in general, right? They were very, very against any Jewish migration to the Holy Land, as they called it at that time. But the writing was on the wall because the migrations never stopped. So they saw, people were able to project that there was going to be, in one way or another, a giant, huge population flood of Jews going there, because it was increasing at an exponential rate as you get closer to the 20th century. Nothing, even without World War II. Some people think World War II was actually, one of the purposes was to stop it. Some people think that, okay? So when they realize they're not going to be able to stop it, they're like, okay, we have to, maybe we'll take over.
Frank, can I just jump in for 1 second? There was an
almost
event.
Done.
No, meaning it's connected to what you're saying, but it needs to be said that the Dreyfus affair was the thing, I think, that was what precipitated for these people that Frank is talking about, for them to realize that secular Jews, or all Jews, need a state. Meaning Herzl witnessed what he witnessed. He was just a kind of a mid-level journalist, as it were, and he was in Austria, but he was witnessing this whole situation happening in France with this Colonel Dreyfus. And he said to himself, there's going to come a time where we're just going to have to get the heck out of here. The guy himself was Herzl. Many people don't talk about this, especially in the kind of pro-Israel circles. He thought that all Jews should convert to Christianity, these Jews in Europe. And then he changed his mind later on. It's a whole story with him. But
he wanted Uganda.
Yeah, but I'm just
I heard that.
Yeah, he thought that the Jews have a state. I don't know if he was, well, at one point he was.
They tried that in Russia too, Birobidzhan.
Yeah, Birobidzhan. At one point he was talking about Uganda, but then he realized, it was the first. They had the first Zionist council in Basel at the end of 1890 something, I believe. And so that's when kind of secular Jews who arrived from all over the Jewish world in Europe were like, okay, we're gonna do this. They already had like the first wave or the second wave of Aliyah, of immigration. They saw that there was already infrastructure. They saw that there were towns built up, Petach Tikva, Rishon LeZion, all these towns from mid-1800s, 1840, right? Hasidic Jews built Petach Tikva in 1840, 1850. And like, okay, so we're gonna go there. We're gonna run stuff, because these guys clearly, they're just like these schleppy people with their farms and their religion and their superstition, and we're gonna be the ones to run it because we know how to run stuff. We're the intellectuals,
Well, I think that's some of the BS that they were peddling, but
the
reality,
of course,
the idea of the enemy of Platonics actually establishing a successful state and realizing some sort of like religious prophecy, they had to stop that at all costs.
Yeah.
So essentially, they're like, we're going to, if we can't stop it, if we can't stop the people showing up there, we gotta take over and interfere with it as much as possible.
Well, the British did a load of that, like, right all the way up through to and through World War II and a little bit afterwards, before they just.
There was a lot of there were many parties who were trying to do all sorts of things, but in some way they're all related in that mission. For that particular little tiny piece of land in that region. So, so basically, that's what they were trying to do. That's obviously why they got the blessing from Stalin during the UN vote about establishing, right? Because they thought, hey, maybe we can make a socialist utopia in the place that's the most anti-social. What a trophy that would be for the Platonics to establish their utopia in the place where their greatest enemy. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like the contrast, it would be like a great psychological victory.
Yeah, psychological propaganda for sure.
Yeah, right. So it would be a great trophy. So they tried to do that. And again, religious Jews, they were just living on the land, and essentially they don't give a damn about. They only care about their relationship to God, living on the land, and doing the commandments related to the land. That was like the whole point of it. Okay. And we weren't really getting a chance to have a government based on Torah. Okay. So essentially they realized, when I say they, I'm talking about what really is a foreign entity to the Jews, who have been the political class of Israel since its inception. Okay,
So you're
of
talking
modern.
about people like Nahum Goldman and Shane Wiseman and people like that, the people who created
Wiseman,
the
yeah.
original.
If I could just jump in
Regular Jews were not allowed, or still not allowed, anywhere near the political class. The only one who ever came near, possibly, it was Meir Kahane. They killed him. He got so close that they got so scared that they just basically assassinated him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Frank, if I can mention for 1 second,
I really need to wrap this up. Okay. I want to.
Keep it in your head, man.
Why are you guys fighting? All right. So basically, around the, I would say, the mid 70s, maybe the early 80s, I think they understood finally that the people, the Jews, the majority of the population, which are made up of religious Jews or kind of religious Jews, or Jews that don't really, but they have respect. They still, they'll come over for Shabbat meal. They believe in God. They'll go to a disco, but they'll sit at Shabbat dinner with their rabbi father. Maybe but they still have respect. They're not enemies of it. So that's who the Israeli population is. And then you have the political class. These are two entirely separate entities. The political class of Israel belongs in Basel, in Geneva. That's where they're from. The Jews are from Israel.
I feel that if we actually put that filter upon most countries, we'd get the same sort of we'd be able to see the same thing. The political class is so separate, and is like it all seems to be post World War II, like quick capture of the political class as well. There was a lot of people who realized, okay, we can change it now, we take over now, and this is a time. And then from that point on, they've been in control, and they've kept that separation final, so that the Jacobin sort of stuff doesn't happen one day.
Yeah, I think the political class, certainly of what we would call the Western civilized world, have been taken over largely by, let's call them the Jacobins. They always have a different name every generation, right? Now they're the globalists, right? In the 1700s, they were the Jacobins. In France, they were, and so on and so forth. Okay, so essentially, if Israel, if the Jews of Israel ever wanted or ever truly decided that they're going to have a country, a functioning country with peace, they need to round up the entire political class and dump them in the middle of the ocean. Then they talk to the generals who we have, the military men who we have, and say, do what you need to do to ensure the security of our people, okay, and get the hell out of their way. End of story. Then all that conflict ends immediately, because people understand that when a country is serious about the safety, and it actually loves and cares for their own people, they take care of their people. So we don't have that anymore anywhere. We certainly don't have it in America. The Brits, I don't know what the hell, they sold you guys a long time ago. And so this is a worldwide kind of phenomena. And by the way, that's what the delay is in finishing off Hamas, because the political class of Israel, they don't give a damn about the Jews, and they don't want to finish Hamas because they need Hamas for their political machinations.
Yeah, perpetual political machinations.
That's it. That's the best way. And then maybe in the course of this conversation, we can explain what the Jewish creed is. So maybe for once, some of the people who listen to you might even know what a Jew actually is. So.
Johnny, you mentioned the British. I want to mention that what Frank was kind of describing. There was two moments here, significant moments during the foundation of the state. This is so before the state of Israel was founded. You had this whole thing that we're describing with the first of all, religious Jews in 1929 in the city of Hebron were attacked. Religious Jews were attacked by Arabs who were incited by Haj Amin al-Husseini, the guy who was working with Hitler and all the rest of it. To us, it's a famous story. I don't know. I'm assuming people know about it. In case they don't, now they do. So Jews were, people keep talking about the state of Israel, the mighty IDF. Jews were attacked before there was any state. 20 years, even before that. The second thing was that there were two groups before the founding of the State of Israel that were kind of, you can call them the founding fathers. One group was led by Ben Gurion, who were these socialists. It was actually called the Hashomer Hatzair. I don't know how to, it's a whole kind of long translation, but that was like the socialist group, and these were the guys that were kind of working with all the socialist groups in Europe, and these are the guys who basically were communicating with the Soviet Union, all the rest of it. These are the guys who were founding the kibbutzim. And then there was groups like Lehi and groups like led by Abraham Stern, and groups like the Irgun led by Menachem Begin. These were the guys that actually pushed the British out of Israel. The British didn't leave by themselves. So Ben Gurion's guys, they wanted to work with the British. They wanted to work with all the kind of people who colonized the place, and hopefully kind of I don't know what they had in mind, but I don't know if the kind of the end game was for the British to leave. So you had these two groups, and they were warring with each other actually until at some point, when the British finally left, and then the Arabs attacked us, and then these guys got together. They put their kind of differences aside, and they were just like, okay, we're gonna fight for our lives, basically.
They had gun battles.
Yeah.
Groups. Yitzhak Rabin fired upon a ship.
Yitzhak Rabin was part of Ben Gurion's group, and there was a ship called, there was a famous story with a ship called Altalina with all these immigrants coming, and they fired upon them. It's another story. And then after that, you basically had as the state was being founded, you had all of these pogroms in the Arab world, Arab countries, on Jews who were living in Arab countries. So all these people, millions of people started leaving. Most of them are religious: Moroccan, Tunisian, Libyan, Egyptian, Iraqi, Persian, all the rest of them. They all came to Israel. What happened? The political class, most of whom are Jews from Europe, started basically treated them like crap, right? Mm-hmm. Those people have to live in tents for 2 years, 2 to 3 years. So you're talking about refugee camps. Jews from Arab countries lived in refugee camps for about, I can't even say it was one generation, it was shorter than that. But that's the thing. After a certain amount of time, they left the refugee camps, right? They got their rights, or whatever it was. The government realized there's a lot of these people. That's when you hear, for example, Palestinians live in refugee camps for, I don't know, however many generations, 5, 6 generations already, which are run by this organization called UNRWA, right? Which is a separate entity for refugees. You have the UN, I think it's called the UNHRC, and you have the separate entity just for the Palestinians in the UN called UNRWA. When you have their schools and they do indoctrination against Jews in Gaza.
UN, could you just say the letters so people
UN Relief Works Agency, UNRWA. That's a separate organization specifically for the Palestinians. So in Palestinian society, not all Palestinians, like let's say you go to the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, not all of them are living in refugee camps. There's some of them, they even have a kind of a split in their society where you have the ghetto Palestinians live in refugee camps who are deliberately kept there. And then you have people with their own houses, beautiful towns. You can go to towns like, Hawara. There's a town called Turmus Aya, right? So it's in Samaria. It's next to Jewish towns. So it's a beautiful town. They even have a Remax sign, real estate. And half the people who own houses there, they don't even live there half the time. They live abroad. They live in UAE. They live in Saudi. They live in
Qatar, in Morocco,
Qatar, and Syria, whatever. So you have this whole thing.
Because that's where they're from.
Yeah, that's where they're from. So you Jordan also. So you have this whole thing where we had our own people living in refugee camps, but they came out eventually, and then they integrated into society. But even so, there's been this thing of like, basically the secular Ashkenazi Jewish, I'm talking about the secular ones, not the religious, keeping down both the Sephardic Jews, the Jews from Arab countries, and the religious Jews.
The religious
Ashkenazi Jews. And it's been going on for decades. Finally, now you have a situation where finally the religious Jewish class and also the Sephardic Jews have managed to kind of break through and break into, the political class, into the Knesset, into society, and all the rest of it. And and still, you look at the Supreme Court, the makeup of the Supreme Court, there's not one Sephardic Jew on there. I heard a comedian, an Israeli guy, he was joking around. He's like, well, maybe we should send them to college. He kind of says, like, implying that Sephardic Jews don't go to college. It's not true.
It kind of is, all right?
It kind of is. Listen, I mean, even if you look at, for example, the Jewish
which is good, by the way.
Yeah,
Thank God they don't go there.
Exactly, yeah.
Corrupted with this. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say that, like, if you go to look at the Jewish community in America, you look at Sephardic Jews, most of them are in business, the family business, what we call the shmata business, or they got this, they got it. A lot of them, most of them, until recently, were not going to college.
It got Sony guts,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, they're selling you a cell phone with HBO, all the rest of it. So
it's Toshiba got Sony guts.
It just make I did one article about it was about a murder of a Sephardic Jew in London in the 40s called Stanley Setti, and they found his torso, his head, and his body chopped up and thrown out of a plane, and it is quite an amazing story. But when he looked into what he was doing, he was in the family business. The family were quite rich. They were Iraqis. They had moved around, of course, because that's kind of what the whole point, their whole shtick was, and they had ended up in London, and basically racketeering across the board and making loads of enemies along the way and making loads of money. He used to walk around with £1,000 back in the 40s, flashing it around. But the whole family had been like making money doing that for a long time. It was like you could, when you research them, you discover no one's gone to college or anything, because it's just like they just go in family business, and they
do you know what happens? Do you know what happens in the Syrian community here in New York when a guy, let's say a guy has a business and it fails? The entire community gets together wherever he lives, not every Syrian person, but just wherever he lives, and they're like, okay, this guy has a track record of successful business, whatever it is, something happened, shit happens. They pull together, I don't know, 200K, 250K, and start him up again. Somebody's cousin, somebody's this, somebody's that. It's funny because there's an organization that I was part of, Russian speaking Jews, where the guy who founded it, this is part of the reason he founded it, because he saw that Syrian Jews had this whole history in America. They had tradition and they had community. Russian Jews, our whole thing was destroyed by the communists. Even when we came to America, everybody's kind of splintered. You come to a Russian speaking Jew, at least back then, not so much now, but back then, and you say, hey, do you want to give kind of charity to this synagogue or this and this? Everybody's like, why should I give my, charity? You guys are a bunch of schnorrers. You guys are a bunch of, what do you mean? This is my hard-earned money. I'm gonna give you money.
Can I tell people what the Jews from Russia who were they were pulled away from their culture for like 2 generations. They didn't know anything. I didn't even know. That's the families that we come from. I didn't know what Shabbat was until I was 14. Never heard of it. Okay, so I learned about it later, and so what is Judaism to a Jew from a Russian, from a Soviet background? Chess. You know what I mean? Like Yiddish theater and chess, and your grandma speaking Yiddish. That's about it.
This is really interesting, because I did a load of when I was helping with the research for One Nation Under Blackmail, I did a load of research about all the different groups that Les Wexner was trying to get involved with, and it was loads of American Jewish, usually Russian Jew, usually Ashkenazi, societies, organizations, groups that they'd seen what had happened in World War II and said, okay, we need to make sure we're organized in the future. And so that makes it, I think, easier to see that political class rise to the top and then fundamentally be in control of everything, and allows for certain corruption all throughout the board. And that's why I saw a lot of clever stuff going on in America, but there was a load of organization, but I think it just left behind every Jew who wasn't willing to sell out other Jews and Judaism in general. I think the people who were at the top of those organizations were trying their best to gain power.
So at this point, I think at this point, if with your permission, gentlemen of the panel, if I had to explain what the Jewish creed actually is, so when we say, yeah, these guys, they sold out, well, people would know what is it that you sold out from? What is it? Would that be all right? I can read 13
please,
principles.
Please. Yes, okay.
This is the Jewish creed. This is going to be a first time for most people, I think, who are listening to this. Maybe
Be
I'm
gentle.
wrong.
Be gentle to them.
I'll be gentle.
Some of them are just simple folk, you know.
Remember that movie True Lies? Remember he got that French guy to make a video recording, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, when and he's like, do it slow, do it.
I can't believe your True Lies reference.
We got a lot of these, man.
I just saw that.
Classic. I saw it in the cinema.
We usually play the clip right about now on our show.
Yeah.
For the folks at home. Yeah.
I wouldn't play the scene where she dances. I'd play the scene where the guy's recording it for him, you know, like the French guy. Yeah. He has like a sexy voice, but he's all like fat and hairy.
The best scene we always talk about is when the Arab guy just yells out, Sharmuta.
Sharmuta. Oh yeah, that is hilarious. Remember when he slapped Tia Carrera? He's like, Sharmuta, flirting like a whore. You know. Anyway, here's the, you know, let's push that to the side. Let's talk about.
I think he's an English actor as well.
He is. He's a British actor. Yeah. He's an Indian. I believe he's an Indian.
Yeah.
We were just talking about in Delta Force how the Arab guy was played by an American guy. Italian.
Listen, we're getting off course. Go on.
All right, here we go.
Let's go with the important stuff.
That's what we do here. That's what we do here. We get off course.
We're chronic. All right. Get off course, guys.
ADD riddled millennials. Anyway, so here we are. This is the traditional Jewish creed. It's been ongoing for about 3,337 years now. And the majority of the Jews historically have held to this creed. Even if they weren't observant, if you ask them what is the Jewish creed, this is what they would say. And essentially now it's not like that because of World War II, where 95% of the Torah institutions worldwide were wiped out. Not playing victim here, just stating a fact. From 100% of the Torah academies within the world, 95% of them were wiped out in World War II. Okay, so that's why people don't know this anymore. Okay, number one, the belief in the existence of the Creator, who is perfect in every manner of existence. And he's the primary cause of all that exists. Okay, so it means he doesn't need help existing. He helps everybody else exist. Okay. Number two, the belief in God's absolute and unparalleled oneness. Now, this is something that the human mind cannot actually we cannot understand this, because when we say, let's say unity, right? You see different parts coming together and we're acting as one, but we cannot imagine an absolutely simple unity with no moving parts and whatsoever, an absolute unity. And I don't think it's possible for the human mind to picture that, but that's the second principle, the belief in God's absolute and unparalleled unity, oneness. Okay, number three, the belief in God's non-corporeality, nor that he will be affected by any physical occurrences such as movement or rest or dwelling. Okay. Number four, the belief in God's eternity, which means he had no beginning and has no end. Okay, as opposed to human souls, which he created, which are eternal, but they did have a beginning. So he had no beginning. Number four, the belief in God's. Sorry, that was number four. Okay, number five, it's imperative to worship God exclusively, the one God as we just described. Okay, and no foreign false gods. Anything that is that differs from that description so far would be considered by Jews a foreign or false god. Okay. Number six, the belief that God communicates with man through prophecy. Number seven, the belief in the primacy of the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, that's Moses. Number eight, the belief in the divine origin of the Torah. Number nine, the belief in the immutability of the Torah, that you can't add to it or subtract from it, even a single dot, a single letter, anything. Number 10, the belief in God's omniscience and providence, all-knowing and micromanages everything. Number 11, the belief in divine reward and retribution, which means, cause and effect, essentially, right? That there are consequences to actions. Okay, number 12, the belief in the arrival of the Mashiach, of the Messiah, and the Messianic era. So we have a tradition, which we've had since the beginning, as to how to recognize the Messiah. That'd have to be a separate discussion if anyone wishes at some point in the future, okay? And finally, number 13, the belief in the resurrection of the dead. Okay. That's the Jewish, I wasn't preaching, I was just informing people who, if you ever really were curious as to what a Jew is, right? Well, that's what a Jew is. That's our creed, okay? Now, there are people who come from Jews, ethnically, right, who are enemies of that creed, okay? And so I would say most of the political class of Israel are enemies of that creed. Certainly several points in from those 13 principles are absolutely antithetical to that. And obviously, anybody who follows Plato, if you're familiar with his philosophy and his religion, you could see why you couldn't have a more a further view away from the followers of Plato. So that's who's been running Israel. But the Jews, that's our creed. So
is some complicated stuff in there though, because I mean, like, but when you view it from any religion, I think most religions believe roughly within the same, or at least think they believe, and don't necessarily think about it actually manifesting in the real world. Because I think there's a disconnect between people who worship a religion and actually go and believe in what they're preaching. Of course, we know it's not even a small percent. It's the majority of people do not practice their religions at all. They think they do. They go through some form of routine that makes them feel comfortable, but they don't actually believe that there's going to be any sort of, in this case, like messianic ending to it all, because that's a complicated thing to get in touch with as well. And the majority of people I know who are religious they're very hard to talk to because they're so scared that they're going to be found out, because they know, because it is a lot of the time when I'm communicating with religious people, I'm not communicating with religious people. They're pretending to be religious, and I'm pretending that they're religious, and they're pretending they're religious, and it's a state of hypernormalization. Everybody's happy and comfortable to stay within their little box.
Why does that sound so familiar? Yeah, it feels like
Johnny.
Can
I tell you something? So neither Frank and I obviously grew up in religious families, and we, Frank at, I guess, age 14 or 15, myself at age, kind of the journey began at age 28, I want to say, but fully kind of, started kind of practicing at age 31. So we kind of chose this, because we know that it's real for our own kind of individual reasons and journeys. And I don't know about I can't speak for Frank, I can speak for myself, that what I found was that there are a good amount of people in the I guess in the Orthodox Jewish community who grew up in these families, through some generations, that they did not have the broken chain, who, again, I can't say it's everybody, and I don't know what's in people's hearts. I'm not judging anybody. I'm not, because I'm not in their shoes. But what I did find was that a lot of people have gotten to a point where they do things by rote, just because, my parents, they say, like, they'll tell you, like, my parents do it, it's just how we do it, my parents do, my grandparents did it, and whatever it is, their parents sent them to Hebrew school and all the rest of it, and they just do it because it's it's good for the family, it's comfortable, whatever it is. And I remember, like, talking to a lot of people, especially when I moved back from after learning in Israel for 3 years, I moved back to America, and I would talk to people about, kind of I guess you want to call it more esoteric stuff in Judaism, and all these different things, and I kept hearing from religious Jews, oh, that heebie-jeebie mumbo jumbo stuff, and I'm just thinking to myself, well, that's why I'm here. You know what I mean? That's why I'm here.
He's talking about like even within Orthodox, community, there exist people who are extremely ignorant of their own Torah. That's
either if they're not, even if they're not ignorant, even if they know about it, they shy away from it. There's many reasons why they shy away from it or why they're skittish of it. There's a whole discussion about, for example, learning Kabbalah, learning the deeper secrets of the Torah, why the Orthodox world came to shy away from it. And it got to a point where people were just like, well, we're just going to do this because, it's Jewish law, because God said so, right? But we have entire literature that explains why we're doing this commandment, why we're doing, what's happening kind of behind the veil while, when we do this. What is the I guess you want to call it spiritual mechanics, if you will.
What is the reason for the verses
in
the Hebrew scripture? What do they mean? What does God want from the Jewish tradition?
What's happening with a man when he's putting on the these, like the boxes that you showed me that you put on tefillin, right? What is happening there? There's something going on. We have rabbis who lived in places like Tzvi who wrote entire books explaining what's going on behind the veil when you're putting on tefillin, when you're washing your hands, when you're keeping Sabbath, doing all the eating kosher food.
When you're done, Greg, when you're done, I want to explain, when you said secret, I'd like to explain what that means when you're done.
Sure. So there's, for me, that was this whole thing. I kind of started to, I guess, absorb and to really, as much as I can really to absorb it inside myself, to realize that this stuff is real. Also, there's things that happen in my life, experiential things that you start to see and correlate. Again, it's individual to the person. I can't give another person my experiences, and to see that this stuff is real. This is some real stuff, and to understand that the people that wrote those books about these things also experience these things on a higher level. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning, where they were able to put themselves in this state of mind. It's really what's called it's a work. In Hebrew, it's called avoda. It's self work. It's I don't know how to translate it, but yeah. And for me, it's real, and it's one of those things where now it's at the point where, you get to a point where and especially what we saw during COVID, where we had all this stuff going on in the Jewish community, specifically in Israel, and in the religious community, where I became sour on a lot of things and a lot of people, particularly rabbis, who were supposed to be our leaders. And then I started revamping my relationship with the community, to where I was like, well, I don't even know if I want to be part of necessarily any organized community, but this stuff is still real to me. So how do I reconcile the two? I got to a point where I want to leave, but I can't leave because of what I know. Again, it's like the red pill. You can't, that's it. I left them. Yeah.
The problem that you were having is that when these organizations, ultimately, they always begin to, again, sell out the principles, right? They stopped representing what they were supposed to represent. They sold out to people, and they just did it a little bit clandestinely. Okay. So but the community is still the same, but those organizations, just flick them away. That's what needs to happen. So I just wanted to just address quickly. We just read the 13 principles. I'd like to just for a moment say what they did not include. They did not include force people to convert or kill them. It did not include harass people until they just get so sick of it that they just say, okay, fine, it didn't. That doesn't exist. Okay, so that's a very, very important, I think, distinction. Okay, that I think people should think about that. And he mentioned the word Kabbalah, which has been completely, people when they hear that word, they think something that is
They
completely
think of Madonna.
The thing with that, yeah.
They think
Madonna.
That is the-
they think
and water and
and that's another level of shit.
and red strings. Yeah.
Layers of crap piled upon the truth.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
so just to explain, what we call Kabbalah. First of all, the word Kabbalah means reception, to receive. You know, like when you receive a radio signal, that's what it means, to receive. Okay, so also it's part of the Torah. It's not a controversial part of the Torah. It explains for those who want to delve into it, you know, the what we call the deeper reasons for the commandments and God's motivations according to the Torah. Okay, as to why is he doing this? Why is he creating the world? You know, and for those who really want to delve into it, and this is how religious Jews would try to become more observant, to keep the commandments. It's supposed to help you keep the commandments even even stricter and with more love and with more dedication. And it's not supposed to push you away from it. So the Kabbalah that most people have heard of in the news is completely nothing like real Torah Kabbalah. Why is it a secret? So there's a book right here. It says the Tanya. So this was a big secret. This was the deepest part of the Kabbalah, and then it was finally written down. It was forbidden to even be written down. It was forbidden to be published, really. I mean, there are manuscripts of the knowledge inside of that, but why was it forbidden to be written down? If you read it, and I encourage everybody to read it, just out of curiosity, because when I heard secrets, I'm thinking, is this going to teach me how to shoot lightning out of my fingers? Is it going to teach me how to fly, how to take over the world? Like, what is, you know, you get excited about it. Am I going to become a Jedi Knight? You know, am I going to be able to like levitate and like telekinesis? You know, when I was a little kid, that's what I thought when people said Kabbalistic secrets. Ooh. And then when I read that, I was extremely disappointed. Because all it does is it tells you more about God and the stuff that he likes and doesn't like according to the Torah. Mm-hmm. And you get very, very disappointed if that's not your intent. If they should say to you, hey, you want to learn more about God and his likes and dislikes and how to get closer to him? Not really. You know, maybe that book's not for you. You know, that's kind of so why did they call it a secret? Because, well, it has to do with intimacy. Okay, so the relationship, ideally, according to the Torah, between God and really humanity, is supposed to be a very, very close relationship. It's supposed to be the most intimate relationship in a person's life, and every human relationship that we know of, right, husband and wife, you know, mother, father. So all of those different relationships that you have in your life are there just to give you a little bit of a hint as to the nature of your relationship between the human being and God. Okay, so, and it's very, very intimate, and obviously sexuality is, you know, again, we say God is reality. It actually says that in the Hebrew scripture. Adonai Elohechem emet. The word emet means reality. It's a statement in the Torah. God is reality. He created everything, and he created every type of relationship. He created the physical universe. He created biology. Everything that you like about being with a woman, he created that. Right? And so now God is neither male nor female, right? There's no way to define him whatsoever. But in the context of of God's relationship with humanity, he takes the role of the husband, even though he's not male nor female. Okay, there's a giving and a receiving. God is the giver. So ideally speaking, according to the Torah, the institution of marriage, the husband is the giver and the wife is the receiver. And obviously that parallels physically as well, and that's not an accident. Okay, so essentially
We're
Like,
getting
what's the-
saucy here, Frank. We're getting saucy.
Hey, listen.
I don't want to
Hey,
give an 18 rating to this
hey,
podcast.
listen. Talk to him. I didn't make this world. This is his whole deal, right?
Yeah.
Listen, everything you like about, I don't know, Jennifer Lopez's bum. He made that. He made you like that. He put that in you for some reason, right? Listen,
He
it's
made
just
me
about
like a butt surgery. That's amazing.
he put it. Whoever, listen, I've been out of the I don't know who the latest version of Jennifer Lopez is. Whatever.
Yeah,
You know,
Jennifer Lopez
Kim
and Kenny O.
Kardashian.
But
Like,
still, she's still looking good. She's still.
what is she, like 70?
50,
She's probably
55,
collecting
yeah.
Social Security, but
Yeah.
she's collecting Social Security by now, Jennifer Lopez. I'm just realizing, okay?
Yes.
So she's probably about in her late 90s, okay? But whatever version of her that is currently, and if you like that, what do you think you created that? Like, I'm listening, anybody listening right now, whatever you like about whatever you like, about whoever you like, you think that came from you? You think you invented that? Where do you think that came from? Okay. So that's God's idea. So, and that all of that, everything that we experience in life, even the most intimate stuff, which is difficult, that's, when you're first getting introduced to these ideas, you're like, because people think God's like an old man in the sky, and it's like, ugh, that's gay. I don't want to be into. God's not an old man in the sky. He's not, these are complex ideas. But the point is that when a person grows in their intellect and in their morality, right, and they want to know more and more about God, so then there's information where the information gets more and more intimate. So finally, if you can imagine, let's say a married couple, right, who love each other, and they have, their bedroom is a private place. That's private. Their relationship, there's layers of privacy, and then there's like the most private of private. And your spouse would very much not like if you were to go around telling people about your private business, right? Because it's not easy to open up and to share your most vulnerable characteristics, or whatever it is that's about you that's most vulnerable, with everyone. So you find someone that you feel comfortable with to open up to and connect to. Usually that's your spouse, right? And there has to be trust, right? You don't want to like run around with your wife's like negligee, like, oh, look what she wears, like, ooh, here's the spice that she likes. That really gets things, like, she'll kill you, right? She'll stab you in the middle of the night, okay? And rightfully so, okay? So that when it says secret, that's what it's like. You're supposed to have the attitude that you're dealing with ever growing levels of private information about God, that he's letting you know for the sake of the relationship. So it's just about having the proper respect with the information.
Yeah.
It's not actually a secret. It's not like, what are the plans to the secret laser missile or whatever the hell, okay?
But it's really easy to make it trend, isn't it? It's really easy to make it trend, and then
you don't
have someone who will box it up and sell it to you
Yeah.
as a Madonna-istic.
You can tell that Madonna never learned any real Kabbalah because she's not an observant. She doesn't observe any of the commandments. In fact, she supports everything to the opposite of observing the commandments. So what they're learning there is not.
Johnny, I was just talking to a friend who actually attends or did attend until recently Kabbalah Center. They have centers all over the world. The problem with that organization or the place is not what they're teaching, it's to whom they are teaching and what comes of it. Meaning the whole thing was, if you're talking about Kabbalah, right, in what's called normative Judaism, they say that you're not even supposed to be learning this stuff until you've learned pretty much all the Torah, until you hit, they say like arbitrary.
I get a feeling there's going to be some sort of equivalent with gender ideology that we're seeing in the Western world.
Could I just since you mentioned that?
Yeah.
So essentially what the Gnostics have done, historically speaking, right? And you'll find Gnostic cults or orders. They call themselves Gnostic orders.
Orders.
Which you'll find that like in every culture in the world, right? You'll find it among the Christians and among Muslims, even among Buddhists, and as of late in history, like from the 1600s, even among Jews. That was probably the most recent of the Gnostic cults developed in the 1600s, and unfortunately, it was a breakaway cult, which was founded by somebody called Shabbatai Tzvi. Okay, so but essentially they're all the same, right? They all essentially like people might have heard of Rosicrucianism, some forms of Freemasonry. It's not fair to say that all Freemasons are these Gnostic pricks. Most Freemasons, especially the type of lodges that we had in America when America got started, they were basically Christians. They were just like regular Christians, but were infiltrated by what they called Illuminati at the time.
Just a note for people who are listening. If you go back to Bruno Dharma, I had a guy called Bruno Dharma come in who talked about different branches of Gnosticism and his own research into it, and it's very much like he was skirting along ideas of Buddhism and other stuff, but then found himself investigating all of these other. So Gnosticism is all about gaining the knowledge of everything, isn't it? And then deciding where you sit in it.
Yeah, they take it right. They take like let's say the deepest texts from all the religions, and they reinterpret it, and they say, but this is the real understanding because my God, which is higher than your God, gave me the knowledge, blessed me with the knowledge, and now I can explain your own text to you. That is literally their attitude. Now,
it's basically it's emblematic of the demiurge itself and the whole idea of just being
that's right.
I don't really give a damn about anything. Let's get it all going on for whatever benefits me. Yeah,
right. Absolutely. So the Gnostics have borrowed greatly from Kabbalistic literature, and then essentially flipped it on its head. So Hermetic Kabbalah, if anybody's ever heard that, or nowadays there's different ways of spelling it. There's Kabbalah with a Q. That's not kosher. There's Kabbalah with a C. That's something that's related to Christianity in some way. And it's funny like how that developed. But generally, when
I've listened to some of the rantings. There's some heavy people out there, man. Heavy people.
Yes. Yeah. Joe Rogan loves to have these guys on, by the way. He loves Gnostic fruitcakes. Graham Hancock and people of that nature. And by the way, even if not everything that they say is wrong, but it doesn't mean that I hate when people get credit for saying something as if like they invented it. You're like David Icke. He never really said anything new except for that he's Jesus or something like that, right? But people love him because he says some stuff and then piggybacks a bunch of other agendas on whatever.
But even that statement, it was nuanced because what he was trying to say, or what he had phrased it as, was really that we are all in touch with the divine at all times, and that in that sense he was Jesus, because everybody is part of the divine. And that was then misrepresented by the media for ages and ages. But then he did go off track in other places.
What he didn't tell you is that some people are more part than others. Okay, and that's why Gnostics always arrange themselves in these elite societies with tiers, right?
I've seen this.
Johnny, I hope this isn't
looking what's going down.
Hey, Ani, I really appreciate your support.
Johnny, I hope your viewers don't get freaked out, but I had to do. Frank accuses me of. You ever watch the show? You ever watch the show? What was that?
My.
Oh,
that's the sound that my son makes when he sees a cat.
Oh, okay.
That's a good sound. He likes it. He's very excited.
Yeah, you ever see the show American Dad?
Yes.
There's a scene in American Dad where the alien Roger is. They don't pick him up from soccer practice. Mm-hmm. So Frank tells me that if I get to put on what I'm wearing right now, it's kind of like leaving God at soccer practice.
Right. Okay, you know what? You're terrible. You're terrible at explaining these metaphors. Okay,
these complex.
So basically, anybody who's familiar with that's the episode where the two main characters, they get a hot tub and they forget their work, they neglect their children and their pets, and they get drunk and sit in the hot tub. And they forgot their son who had to walk home. Yeah. And then they forget Roger, who's like their child, but he's an alien. and they left him at soccer practice, and he was sitting in the parking lot.
It's already dark. It's dark.
Alone in the moonlight at the soccer field. Right? He's looking all sad and rejected.
Yeah.
So I was trying to guilt him with that. But anyway.
Really do you want to explain to people who have no idea what you were putting on there?
This is something called, it's interesting. The Hebrew word for this is tefillin. There's only one word, meaning the English translation for tefillin is phylacteries, and that word in English, or I guess Greek, is only referring to one object on earth, which is this. It doesn't refer to anything else. It's phylacteries. It's the Greeks, I guess, or Jews living in Greece decided to name this thing phylacteries. Inside are scrolls that where you have written certain verses from the Torah that refer to the the Exodus of, I guess, the Exodus of Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. What we say in some
it's part of what is written inside the boxes,
Yeah.
right? The one that he wears on the arm has one compartment with a scroll that's similar to this, that has 4 different sections of this Hebrew scripture itself, mostly from Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
And the one that goes on the head has a separate compartment for each excerpt from the Hebrew scripture, and because it literally says to do that, and we can go into that some other time, because it says explicitly in the verse that you wear it as a sign upon your heart and as a reminder between your eyes, and but we have to get into the grammar to see what that really means.
Guys, you want to freak out. 2 houses that they found in these attacks that were everything was burned inside. There were 2 different houses they found in a thermos or something that looks like a thermos, completely intact tefillin. Nothing happened to them. Like, you want to say open miracle? I mean,
so wait, let's get back to sort of what is going on, because I mean, you've given people kind of like a rough guide to what you see Judaism as being. And
it's not what I see. That it's what traditionally, historically, it is.
Words.
And
go on.
So, but I guess there's something that you just said that reminded me, and it does get us back on the point. Jews don't need to, like, it's such a level of pain and humiliation whenever these idiots from the political class in Israel get on TV and start showing pictures of things, and then as if we need to prove to somebody that what happened.
Yeah.
It's so there's such a goddamn disgrace. We don't give a damn if anybody, like, if your house got robbed, you listening, right? And something horrible happened. Do you care if, like, somebody comes up to you and says, I don't believe that it happened? Like, why would you even give a damn? You're just, dealing with it, right? You're mourning, and you're trying to repair the loss and whatever. Like, so
I despise once the narrative writers start embellishing on a tragedy. I think that's one of the things that repulses so many people when something like this happens, and when something like September the 11th happens. I mean, trying to find out the reason why it happened and what is going on is got to be separate from all of the rest of this, and how it feels at the time, what actually has gone on. Because for a lot of people, they what they see is tit for tat. They see this as like, lots of Palestinians have died. Lots of people have like, see that this is a perpetual. This is never going to end unless there's some form of finality. It's got to be said. That word has got to be said, because obviously, the state of affairs in Gaza is terrible. No one wants to see that in the world. It looks terrible for
but what people don't understand is they are literally funding that exact culture and activity of.
No, I understand. Because what you see when you actually, because if I wanted to paint it as all resistance fighters who are all innocent, then I would be the biggest fool around, because I've seen some of the videos, and we were talking about before we come on about I had to go and watch the video of Shani Look, who was one of the young girls who were taken by Hamas, and they had her in the back of a van, and their legs were broken, obviously, and it's a terrible thing to see. You can't even imagine how people can get to that stage where they're so detached from humanity. And loads of people say, well, that's what's been done to them, but it's not just that. There is a culture, and that culture exists all throughout humanity, regardless of a religion, and it is allowed to stagnate or breed in an area or not. And so I can, there's always, Hamas is obviously one of the worst things that you can imagine about, like, running a place like Gaza, like an organization like Hamas, but trying to understand where they come from and why they've got so much power then makes it all so much difficult to work out where you go with Gaza and what happens, because at the end of the day, this is going to keep reoccurring. Things like this are going to keep reoccurring unless there is something done. There has to be something.
Well, Johnny,
done.
Can I tell you something? When this thing happened, and I so much as brought up the very important piece of history, how we got to this point, I said to my Jewish friends, and a lot of people agreed with me, and then there was a few people religious Jews even, who got upset with me, and I said, in 2005, Ariel Sharon, before he pulled the Jews out of their homes in Gush Katif, he didn't create, but he facilitated, or allowed the creation of Hamas. Why? Because he figured these religious, what a lot of people think troglodytes would be the counter to his enemy, which was the PLO. The PLO was doing all the damage at that time, the intifadas and all the rest of it. For years and years. We're talking going back again before the state, starting with Husseini. And so Hamas, as we know, is an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood. So they came in. And then we just pulled our people out of their homes. And that's it. And I mentioned that, and they're just like, they got really upset. They're like, oh, you're saying slander about another Jew, especially a guy that passed away. I'm like, listen, I'm giving you history of how we got here. And then I started talking about how we have these successive governments who are just deliberately not solving this problem. Again, we could have avoided all this PR, all this stuff, all this, not as Frank said, not we give a damn what we look like, but we could have avoided even this whole disaster by just nipping these guys in the bud right in the beginning. Or not giving.
I disagree because Sharon, look, you're entitled to your opinion, but Sharon is just a lapdog of again that political political class who gave him the order to do in order to set up this exact situation. He was also being in order blackmailed to start World War III. Do you understand? So Jews in Israel want to wipe out Hamas and rid themselves of these orcs.
Jews, yes.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on a second. We don't want Jews to have nothing to do to. We don't want to be pawns of the military-industrial complex run by fucking Nazis who want to start World War III for multiple reasons, and certainly to wipe out huge portions of the population. It's part of their plan, and they've said as much. So that's why Ariel Sharon did this. Okay, I'm sorry.
I know. No, that's what I'm not arguing with you. I'm saying that I was trying to tell these people what you just said, and they got it into their heads that this guy, because he did all this stuff prior to that, again, all these military victories and all the rest of it, they turned this guy into a hero. And just like they beat Netanyahu into a hero because he was in the special forces and he saved people in the Sabina flight or whatever, in the hijacking and all the rest of it. Listen, at one point, I've told this to Frank, this is my opinion. At one point, these guys probably cared about their people. And at some point, they started living a double life. That's just my opinion. They started living a double life. And, You know, it's funny. We always say Netanyahu lives in Caesarea. You might as well live in a town called Hitleria. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, it's
the
just
Milnitsky area. Can you imagine that?
yeah,
Freaking. How about Mel Gibson area?
yeah.
How about
Can you
Jews
be any more? I mean, at best he's just disconnected from the people. At worst, he's I mean, it's astounding.
they're not Jews.
Yeah.
Say, listen to me. People don't understand what Gaza is. They don't understand the level of the perversion that occurs there, and it's the worst thing that exists on planet Earth right now. And for those who know the story a little bit about like Lord of the Rings, right? There's a lot of great metaphors to understand there because do you have any familiarity with Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. I'm British. Yeah.
No, I mean, listen. I'm not calling you a hobbit because you're British. You know what I'm
No.
saying?
I'm saying.
Are you from the Shire? I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we perpetuate the stereotype?
In a sense, there's I live around the corner from the Shire because the Shire is really like Somerset, sort of Gloucester area where they all would talk like that. I mean, I can map out England to where he was kind of basing his Middle Earth as well, because that's really the Midlands, and the Black Country would be where Sauron is from, I believe, and the Welsh is very much like the Elvish people, so I think that's. Yeah, and etc. So he took little bits out of it. Go on. Sorry.
The Welsh are enormously beautiful, like Catherine Zeta-Jones. I know. Right.
Some of them are enormous and beautiful as well.
I heard Orlando. Thank you, Rafi. Appreciate it. I heard, he agrees. I heard Orlando Bloom described the elves as they're all enormously beautiful. Anyway, so but. Basically, if those familiar with the story, what are the origin of the orcs, right? So you have the creator of that story, right? He's like parallel to God, right? And he created the elves and men, right? And he adopted dwarves, right? So they are also considered his children, right? But orcs, where do the orcs come from? So I was researching this a little bit, and there's like an evolution of thought in terms of what their origin is, right, from Tolkien, and but most people settled on the idea that they came from elves and men who were tortured and had horrible things happen to them slowly and methodically. And originally Melkor, right, he was the original one to create orcs. He did it not initially to use them as a weapon against the other races, but as a way to insult God. Like, look, I took your precious children, and it was a way to piss in his face, basically. Like, look, I perverted it and destroyed it, right? I took something beautiful, I took something pure, and I just dumped it into evil for about whatever the process was, and developed an orc. Gaza is a UN funded orc factory where they take a beautiful child, a perfect human being, okay, because every human being is divine. It's created in the divine image, right? And they immerse it in hatred and evil, and they literally would take those children. This is the definition of psychopathy. You would find, if you want to see psychopathy, you have to go to Gaza, because they use children literally as Kevlar vests. I don't give a damn if you believe me or not. I don't care. Anybody's interested in the truth, you can go see this for yourself or not. F all. I really don't give a damn to prove it to people, okay? But anybody who takes a look, who investigates it a tiny bit, will see that they would literally, if there was a siege in Gaza, right, they would eat the children. They would use the children's hair to make ropes. They use the children.
A lot of people would say that's desperation, though. That's desperation.
I don't give a damn. I really don't give a damn about what the reasoning is and about what their justifications are. And they were driven. Look,
there's no reason to. I mean, there's been plenty of examples throughout history of people who have overcome their own selves to create something bigger and to let go of all of the pain of the past and stop the cycle, like generational cycles. There's loads of examples of that throughout history. So
if that was the goal, you understand? But if you listen to Hamas themselves, if you read their charters, and if you listen to them to their TV presentations in Arabic, you'll see that they have no interest in a state, in a land, and they keep saying over and over again, we will drive the Jews into the sea and we will hunt down every Jew on earth.
Johnny, I just posted a 37-second clip. Are you able to play it? Like share screen?
Wait, I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna wrap up.
You keep talking.
I'm gonna wrap up my point. My point is that Gaza is it's a project. You can start this project in the middle of the desert in Sahara. You could start it in Michigan State, where if a group of people come together and say, we're going to create a death cult, which develops this kind of human being. So when I say it's an orc factory, that's what I mean. Okay. So that's just what the hell it is. And
right. Give me just 1 second, gentlemen. I got to click a few.
A child should be nurtured with love, not hatred. It should be taken care of, protected, not used as a human shield. These are the worst people on earth, and everybody who funds them should literally burn in hell.
I can agree.
This is a show that was shown to some of the guys probably who attacked.
نحن رواد الغد سنعيد لهذه الأمة مجدها وسنحرر الأقصى إن شاء الله وسنحرر.
I'm just going to pause it because I want to read it out for the people who don't speak Arabic. There's a Mickey Mouse style character
his name is Farfour.
Farfour.
Yeah, and they had an episode where he was killed by a Mossad guy, supposedly, allegedly, and he was replaced by Khalkhul the bee, who really, really hates Jews even more than Farfour does.
Oh wow!
No, this is a kids program.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but
dude, it's
The Addams family would be like, they would blush at this. They would be like,
So it says, yes, we tomorrow's pioneers will. Oh my god, I can't believe how terrible this Zoom is for hiding panels. Yes, we tomorrow's pioneer will restore to this nation its glory.
نعيد لهذه الأمة مجدها وسنحرر الأقصى.
And we will liberate Alaska with Allah's will.
إن شاء الله وسنحرر العراق إن شاء الله وسنحرر.
And we will liberate the Muslim countries invaded by murderers.
بلاد المسلمين التي تجتاحها هذه الأثناء القتلة. سننتصر يا بوش.
We will win, Bush.
وسننتصر يا شرون.
We will win, Sharon. Sharon is dead.
That's when he was in a coma.
سننتصر يا عمر. سننتصر يا.
We will win, Condoleezza. We will win. We will win.
So that was more about Iraq and kind of like this whole deep state people who were acting, but they have other ones where just like, stab the Jew and we don't have Jews in our town because we grew them out and all the rest of it. And like Jews,
yeah,
we can. Not
okay, so but how do you change a society that's become so unhealthy after years and years of what is neglect? Because it can't be. You have to admit, it can't be nice to live in Gaza. If we can find a happy medium, it must be one of the worst places to live. So if
Johnny, there's an account on Twitter, Israeli guy. I don't even know where he gets these images from. Maybe he's in Telegram groups or the rest of it. He literally shows you, I can send it to you as well. He shows you like malls, shops, apartment complexes, people's cars in Gaza. If people tell me that this is a genocide and this is I guess an open air prison and all the rest of it. Man, these guys, like, listen, I'm from the Soviet Union, and this is, before the internet, we had our government telling us certain things about America. They were showing us images of what was going on in the streets of New York in the 70s and 80s, and we thought that was all of the entirety of America.
Yeah.
And
But
so
crime flourishes in
Yeah.
those sort of areas,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
will bring in a certain amount of wealth. But not. I mean, also those places have loads
Yeah.
of poverty and loads of
For
like,
sure.
hardship.
What I'm saying is, like, we have the internet today, and if people actually really want to see the truth, that's what astounds me about, you know, living in this day and age where we have the internet and people just spout out like just half truths or all the rest of it, and I'm just kind of like, dude, man, like, I don't know, I just feel like people are living in their own kind of bubbles and they don't really. Frank, you're muted. Yeah.
We definitely are living in our own type of bubbles.
Sorry.
I wonder how long Frank's been talking at us for.
No, I just want to say, you asked what to do, right? So what's the solution? Okay. So there's a country that neighbors Israel. It's called, it was called in recent times, Jordan. 80% of Jordan are what has recently, in the later part of the 20th century, came to call themselves as Palestinians, the same ethnic groups, the same tribes that make up
at one point like Transjordan or something along those.
Well,
lines.
that's before the mandate. Before
just keep what you're thinking, because all the way through, and I must say this before I forget, all the way through, keep for what you're thinking there. I've been thinking about, I did, lots of people have heard me discuss the genetic map of the UK. And if you look at the like genetic heliotypes, or however you call it, for the traditional tribes of the UK, they haven't actually moved in 1,500 years. Everybody kind of like population mass of the UK got so dense in certain areas that you couldn't really, like, this tribe couldn't mix with this tribe anymore and couldn't take any more land without it being war, and it'd been loads of peace over certain times, because if you're surrounded by tribes, you've got to make friends with everybody, or you get fucked over by everybody eventually. So in like Wales, there's 5 different genetics in Wales. There's like South Wales, South Pembrokeshire, North Pembrokeshire, North Wales, and the Marshall Lord. They're all from different like genetic strands. Down in the south west of England, you've got like Cornish and the Devonians, and they're separate from the French, who are in the southeast. We call them the English, and they're in control of everything. And then there's the people of the Elmet around Leeds, and there's the people of the Humbers, and there's 2 different genetic branches up in Scotland. Now, if you go and do the same in the Middle East, what I find extremely interesting, and I think it's tragic, I think this is one of the biggest tragedies that is unwritten. It's not actually put down, but the Palestinian people in general, what is there of them? If you do those tests, you find that they are related to basically Bedouin tribes that used to travel from place to place all around the region and had no specific home. So what I find extremely ironic is that those people over time, due to like things like you know, I suppose the organization of like Westphalian system sort of countries, and then all of the other things built around all of these nation states around these people who were really transient people who were like gypsies of the area to an extent. And what I think I see now is a tragedy where that's what happens when a population mass grows to a certain level, and the certain like transient community can no longer be transient without it becoming into conflict wherever it goes. So that I just want to say while we're talking about this, because I find it extremely interesting and ironic, because I think that if there was no, imagine, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing or whatever, but imagine there were no states, no Israel, no Egypt, no anything around that area, then I think a lot of these people would move to a better place. That's it.
There's a video of a official, I think he's a Hamas official in Gaza, and he appears on Egyptian television during one of these conflicts that we had with them, and he's screaming at them. He's saying, guys, we are all Egyptian, we're all Saudi, we're all this. How come you don't take us in? You know, today the King Abdullah.
That's not what he said. How come you're not helping the cause?
You're not helping the. No. He said you're that, and you're not taking. He said you're not taking us. This is like a few years ago. This is like 10 years ago. You're not accepting us in. We want to be part of Egypt or wherever these countries.
Greg, can you play that Saudi guy that I sent you today? And
I've seen that clip along. Yeah.
I'm
can't
pretty
play,
sure that most people
Yeah.
have not seen the existence of such a sentiment from Saudi Arabia.
I can't
think
play
mo-
because I can't share share the screen.
Oh, okay. Can you? Would it be?
I'll see if I can sort it out. You keep talking while I see if I can work out.
But
Can you-
I just posted this clip of this minister.
Can you send it? Okay.
Hamas minister slams Egypt, whatever.
So short term, I'm just saying, like what you're describing, Johnny. Yeah, it'd probably be best if, and Greg, you said this the other day, from Mordechai Kadari, like saying that when you go to these Palestinian towns, you'll see that they're separated by tribal affiliation from where they came from originally, right? And they maintain that, and they understand, they can recognize each other. They say, oh, that guy's not from my tribe. And so between themselves, they know that they're not a people. But so the solution would be to let them join their countrymen in Jordan, which is majority what people today call Palestinian, and have separate emirates, to reduce to reduce conflicts, because Israel can't have a permanent enemy encampment, literally butchering their people and sending rockets literally every single day.
But where does Gaza border? Before we watch this, where does Gaza border? Doesn't it border
Egypt.
It borders Egypt.
The Sinai, the Sinai, which we gave away, by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So
it's not a long trip. It's not a long trip to Jordan. It's like like an hour and a half. It's not such a big deal. If that decision were ever to be made, we're not talking about.
Now this clip's 3 minutes long. Am I playing it all?
You could play just like the last minute. This is a Hamas minister speaking on like Egyptian television.
Right, there you go.
He's talking about how we're basically this and that, and we're from he's in Saudi Arabia, from Yemen.
So when we seek their help, it's in order to continue to
نستنجد إنما نستنجد لنواصل الجهاد والحمد لله أصولنا كلنا عربية ويستطيع كل فلسطيني في غزة وفي كل فلسطين أن يأتي.
He's going too fast for me to read.
Yeah.
Allah be praised. We all have Arab roots, and every Palestinian in Gaza and throughout Palestine can prove his Arab roots, whether from Saudi Arabia, from Yemen, or anywhere.
Yeah.
We have blood ties. So where is your affection and mercy? Personally, half my family is Egyptian. We are all like that. More than 30 families in Gaza Strip are called Al-Masri, Egyptian. Brothers, half of the Palestinians are Egyptians and the other half are Saudis. Who are the Palestinians? We have many families called Al-Masri whose roots are in Egypt, Egyptian. We may come from Alexandria, from Cairo, from Dumitia, from the north, from Aswan, from Upper Egypt. We are Egyptians, we are Arabs, we are Muslims. We are a part of you. Allah Akbar, all be praised to Allah. Allah Akbar. How can you keep silent, O Muslims, when the people of Gaza are dying? You watch from the sidelines without providing them with the simplest things, which you can give to the West for the most meager price. There you go. Wow. These are, we gotta, we've always got to put into context that this is subjective. Our own opinions are all individuals, and to get everybody on board on something means you have to have something that's realistic and proper. And that would be some form of solution, would be Gaza becoming Egyptian and West Bank becoming Jordan.
They don't want, first of all, Egyptians,
they never wanted Gaza.
They don't want the Palestinians, because if you hear the Arabs themselves from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, you'll see constantly they're saying, we don't like you, we don't know you, you whatever you say, we don't believe you. I wish I could get people to see some of the statements from the Saudis themselves about Palestinians, which is troubling. But that's why I'm saying that right now, most Palestinians, even if they're not originally from Jordan, the majority of these groups that he was just describing, they find themselves in Jordan right now. In fact, they make up 80% of the population there. Okay, so that would be the short-term solution for where to go. And just to understand, the Muslim world, right, in general, is I think it's at least 1.5 times the size of the continental United States, if you include Alaska. Okay, so there's a lot of places to go, and there's a lot of money.
But the elephant in the room is 1967, the redrawing of the borders and occupied territories. That is the always going to end up being the elephant in the room, because if any deal came in with Egypt or Jordan for something like that, if a backing could be found, there would have to be some form of settlement. I know that's a pun.
Can't be. It's a literal impossibility, not because you have to understand the physical geography of Israel. Okay. Yeah. Now, let's say, I hate to do this, but because the most important thing is the religious aspect and the connection of Jews to Israel. But let's say you were just a general and you were a robot and you were tasked. You're not even a human general. You're like an AI that was tasked with protecting the population of this country. Okay. So it would say, oh, no. Like you can't give them the entire high region of the country, all the mountains and the hills, because they will constantly, shoot at the lowlands, which they were doing before 1967. The Syrians were using the Golan to snipe Israeli kids, Jewish kids in playgrounds, and the Arabs from Jordan, because Jordan controlled the West Bank until 67, they were literally doing the same thing from Judea and Samaria.
And Jerusalem as well.
Yeah. And Jerusalem as well. Okay?
The old city. Yeah.
So it's a strategic, practical,
if nothing
according
else,
to the laws of physics, impossibility to give them those territories because, well, for obvious reasons. They will literally kill every Jew that they possibly can. The only thing holding back the Arab nations from killing every single Jew in the world is that they physically don't have the ability yet. They're not interested in any kind of like real peace. There's a couple of people in Saudi Arabia that are like, oh, look, I'm tired of this crap already. Yeah. I got a lot of money. I got a lot to lose. Maybe we can make some business deals with the Israelis and let's move forward. But the majority of the people want Israel destroyed and every single Jew dead. I'm sorry, that's just the way that it is. Okay. So for that reason alone, we cannot give them those territories that were from 1967. There's a reason why.
Which we got as a result of a war of self-defense.
Anybody who thinks that, I'm sorry, like if you were to get there, you see the geography, and from a military standpoint, if you're trying to keep your citizens, if your objective is to keep your citizens alive, those are the last places you're going to give to a hostile enemy. They made themselves our enemy.
Frank, can I give two kind of anecdotal things that from something that I was privy to go to these places in Israel. One was when I went to my friend's wedding in Netanya, which is on the coast of Israel, which is about an hour north or 40 minutes north of Tel Aviv. It was an outdoor wedding, and there were guys there with, they had guards. And I asked my friend, I'm like, how come you have guards? He goes, well, he's like the tip of what they call Samaria, the West Bank, is only about 4 miles away. And he said that there's been reports of like 12, 13-year-old kids climbing over the fence with axes from a town called Tulkarem, and just walking over or taking a taxi and just kind of, to them, it's like child's games. Another thing, I was actually able to go to, there's a town in the westernmost point in Samaria called Peduel. And you could go to a park, and you could look this up, Peduel, Peduel, and you could literally, from that vantage point, you could see the entirety of Tel Aviv. You could also see the airport. So now imagine somebody with some kind of weapon, guy just standing there. You can fire it at Tel Aviv, you can fire it at an airplane taking off, landing. Just even if you take away the religious aspect of this whole thing, I mean, it's just high ground. And the funny part is that we didn't even have this until 1967. It's a war of self-defense. I don't even think the government even planned on taking these territories. As far as Gaza is concerned, Menachem Begin, a right-wing prime minister, when he made the deal with Sadat, when he gave back the Sinai, he actually said, by the way, man, do you want Gaza? Sadat was like, No, I don't want Gaza. So these are the practical things. I'll say one thing. This whole discussion about the Palestinians and what, the Arab world doesn't want them. What's his name? King Abdullah said he's not going to take any in. There are verses in the Torah itself that talk about, it's like a warning when God is giving us a warning, and he's telling us, this is after we leave Egypt and all the rest of it, and we had the incident with the golden calf, and it's a whole long story, but we got the second tablets because Moses came down and he broke the first set of tablets, and we were giving a warning. We said, if you don't keep these commandments, you are going to be pestered by a non-nation. And it's going to be for like a long time. And it's just going to be a thing of like, and there's commentaries on this, you're going to wonder like, why is the world with them? Like, I was just talking to my friend yesterday. Listen, let's be real here. Like, you look at Israel, right? You have, and I'm not here to work. I'm not working for the Israeli government. I'm not here to do like PR or what they call hasbara. You have like microchips. You have all these inventions. You have all these things, and here you have about these bunch of people who live among us, who are trying to have their own state. They could have had it for a long time, 10 times over, long time ago. And I fail to understand what's so special about these people. Do you understand my question? Like, it'd be one thing if you like contributed something to your region, to the world. I'm not saying they don't deserve to live. They for sure deserve to live. If they want to live in peace, let them live in peace. But like, there's such the world is fascinated with them. They're not fascinated. They're not fascinated.
The world's fascinated by the underdog. The world's fascinated by the people who are most likely to be losing.
Sure,
that's the classic socialist.
But you had 100,000. You had 100,000 Palestinian or Arabs in Syria. Some of them Palestinian being obliterated by Assad. No Arab ever went on the streets of Michigan Avenue in Chicago, like I saw during the Lebanon war, saying free Syria or free the Palestinians of Syria. There's a part of my language, a fucking fascination when it's us, when it has to do with us, and they're obsessed with these poor people who I don't know what they
are poor people.
Sorry.
They are poor people.
But it's just like
I want to tell you why. Let me interrupt you for a second, okay?
Yeah.
They are poor people. They're very tragic people, okay? Because they are being used as pawns by if you're from a Western European country or even some Eastern European countries, right? And I'm not talking about the citizens of that country or just the regular people. I'm talking about the government, this entity which we keep going back to, right? They despise the Jewish people proper. They despise them, okay? Around the late 70s and early 80s, the socialists or the globalists, whatever you want to call them nowadays, the Platonics, realized that the Jews of Israel are not going to adopt this philosophy because they're mostly religious or they're respectful of their tradition. They're not going to break away from it. So a decision was made in the early 80s. We must dismantle the state of Israel because it's not going to be the socialist utopia that we were trying to build, and we can't have Jews living there under their traditional belief system. It has to serve, the elite of the world. And if it's not going to be our way, it's going to be no way. So we're going to make it so hostile that they've been essentially trying to dismantle Israel as a place where Jews live for probably since the early 80s, late 70s. Okay. And not only that, there's multiple reasons. Okay. While they're doing that, they're also going to try ignite World War III. Okay, so the Jews are poor people and the Gazans are poor people. And if you're a big supporter of the Gazans, right? And if you actually cared, if you actually gave a damn about those people and about those children, then you would first of all, you would familiarize yourself with where they live, what they're taught, okay, how they're brought up, how the children are used. If you support that, you should fucking die. If you support that culture and their mission, you are responsible for those dead babies. It's you, are responsible for those dead babies. And God will take revenge upon you for taking perfect human life that he created and turning it into what you see over there. And you paid for it, you're fucked. I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little bit emotional because I have family and friends from many sides who are in danger and who are getting bombed right now. And maybe I'm not as calm as I normally am, but at least I'm actually saying I'm saying what I actually think and feel. And I don't really give a damn what anybody thinks at all.
Well, I think everybody's going to have their. I mean, it's such a strong opinion on this, and I mean, so easy to commentate on it without having a real dog in the fight. Everybody does it. They pick a side, and the politicians all say, this is all where Israel's got all of the rights under the sun, and all of the people who consider themselves down on the ground and with people and left wingers and etc. all like, oh no, the Palestinian people are the best and Israel was. And it's, of course, everything's nuanced, and even that passion, that emotion you've got will cloud your judgment, but it will also bring you to realizations that you must come to, and that you could get to by going through emotional experiences, turmoil, tragedy, and the things that you would say definitely that God has given everybody for their own trials in life. Go on.
Something that we didn't discuss. So let's talk about on a fantasy hypothetical situation. Let's say a miracle happened, and all of a sudden, all the Gazans, they laid down their weapons. Palestinians, all the Arabs, they laid down their, like, we had enough of this. What do you think would happen?
I get honestly.
What would happen? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is going to be a lot different than most other people. The globalists and corporations will move in a high speed and start creating probably one of the biggest mega cities under the sun. And then,
the globalists, let's say this is a hypothetical. So let's say the globalists can't get to them, and all of a sudden they snap out of of this like violent spell. What's going to happen is you'll have Jews living there, you'll have Arabs living there, and it'll be fine. Now, historically, let's say if Israel was finally given the chance to be run according to the Torah. Well, here's what would happen. Exactly the same thing. Because the original reason for Israel in the first place was to be a place where if people from the other nations wanted to, they could come and dwell in the land of Israel with the Jews and learn about the God that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob described, that were trying to let the world know. That was the original point of Israel. It says that in the Hebrew scripture, that person who comes there and wants to live there with you and to serve God, right, and to learn more about God, doesn't have to become Jewish. We're talking about non-Jews. They can come and dwell. There's a word for this kind of person. It's called a ger toshav. And it says in the Hebrew scripture, it says, he is your brother. And we have religiously, we have obligations to them where we have to sustain them. We have to make sure they're fed, make sure they have proper shelter and all the opportunities. That's literally the point of a Jew living in the land of Israel. That was the point. That was the ideal. Okay. Obviously, history went awry, but
somewhere along the line. Yeah,
it's important to understand what the ideal was. So if Israel was permitted to be run according to the Torah, at least with national policy. Okay, it's not the Torah's policy to coerce people to become observant or to wear any kind of like hat or getup or anything like that, because that would nullify the free will environment that God created. Because he could have just created a robot that does everything he wants. If you force somebody to do something, that's not what God's looking for according to the Torah. But at least as a national policy, and for example, what were the Jews supposed to do ideally from a religious Jew standpoint in this situation? Let's say all of a sudden, hypothetically, the Messiah comes and the king, and he runs Israel according to the Torah. So here's what it says. And it says in the Torah, and this is an example for all nations to follow. If your enemy rises up against you to kill you, you rise up against him and kill him first. And then it continues to say that if you were to actually rise up and prepare for and to meet your enemy before he has the ability to kill you, usually that enemy stands down. And most of the time it nullifies the conflict in the first place. That's the nature of the world right now.
And Frank, I wanted to mention real quick.
If somebody sees a vulnerability, they will attack.
Okay? I wanted to mention the irony. We were talking about, the founders of the state of Israel in 1967. Ironically, the anti-religious founders, even up in 1967 and 1973, they weren't religious. Somebody like a Moshe Dayan, the guy with the eye patch, he wasn't a religious guy, but this is actually what they did. They preempted. They knew that these armies that were funded by the Soviet Union were getting ready to it was a war of extermination. That's how Nasser termed it. And they knew this, and they were just like, we gotta preempt. So these non-religious guys were following the Torah to a T. Today
not on purpose. Not on purpose.
Just out of self-preservation, just out of the fact that some of them were like in death camps in Russia and all the rest of them, they're Holocaust survivors. Just instinct, really. But that it just so happened that they follow the Torah. Today we don't have that anymore. We have don't shoot until fired upon. Buy this Iron Dome from America. Let America run the show. Become a vassal of America. Become completely unrecognizable. And tell your citizens, yeah, you see, we have this Iron Dome thing. Even like Ilhan Omar, you see, these guys have Iron Dome. And she says, but keep in mind, the people of Gaza don't have Iron Dome. Like,
maybe if they stop shooting rockets.
Yeah.
Listen, the point is that Moshe Dayan...
I don't think you can make an Iron Dome that'll work for the type of rockets that Israel's got. I mean, that would have to be
that's even
Iron Dome.
Yeah, but you see...
but the whole, I mean, that's
it's such an insane idea, the Iron Dome. It's so idiotic.
Yeah.
You know that each one of those rockets cost
$100,000.
I heard I actually heard 70,000, but anyway, but 70,000 per rocket. Do you know how many rockets Hamas fires at Israel?
It costs Hamas way less.
It's going to bankrupt the whole country.
When America struck like Syria with 7 JASM missiles back in what was about 2017 or something, 2018, each one of those missiles cost $1 million. I mean, that's why you have perpetual warfare. It's the money. Yeah. I mean, and so that's why the whole region, the whole state, everything is meant to be like this. And that's why that even if you lived, had a better system and lived by the Torah, and everybody could put down their arms and stop fighting against each other and start living peacefully together, then the shit would still rise to the top, take control and ruin everything, because that's what shit does. And that's not going to change until, well, for you guys, until there's the big change, and for
You're right.
us in the Western world, until there's and us in the Western world who are not necessarily following any type of religion or doctrine is
I disagree in one little step. The reason why the shit rises to the top, there's really only one reason: because of the stupid laziness of the rest of us, because we don't read. All we have to know is all we have to do is read and find out and listen to these people, who they are and what they believe. It's not that hard. Just understand.
But when you don't know, then they tell you what to read. They're the ones who guide you, and they take over all of the places that are to guide you. And so everybody I see who goes into university and etc., I feel really sorry for, because I know they're being guided to a dead end void that will probably, will make them a slave in the future rather than anything else, because they're not teaching people the old stuff. You're talking about Plato. I talk about like Marcus Aurelius and other ways to live your life, ways to look at the past and learn the lessons of the past and see why these same systems, and how, if you understand the base of anything, you can recognize it over and over again. If you understand fallacies, you recognize the fallacy when it's being put upon you, and you can say, oh look, I can see the logic there, the error in your logic. So whether that makes it untrue or true is still still irrelevant to the use of the logic or the illogic there.
You mentioned somebody who's an anomaly, by the way, in history.
I was just going to say, Frank.
Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was like a brother to Rabbi Judah. Was like a brother to Rabbi Judah the Prince. They were absolutely inseparable. It was a historic anomaly. Religiously, we say it was the rectification of the relationship between Jacob and his brother Esau. They deeply loved each other. They were like brothers, truly. So Marcus Aurelius was one of the few guys. There were some others too. Not everybody was bad, but generally speaking, can I describe quickly what most of the Platonics believe? It's actually pretty quick.
Yeah. Go.
So they essentially believe, there should be a king priest class, right? That runs everything, and these rise up through the ranks, and they are discovered because of their intellectual talents, right? They rise up to the ranks, and they guide the development of humanity, of human evolution. This goes into the idea of the homunculus and all of these, Gnostic-y, if you read Gotha is just a continuation of their beliefs. Okay. So they believe that there should be a king priest class. Now, in this class, there are no husbands and wives and no children. Every woman is every man's wife, and every man is every woman's husband, and the children are raised by the state. That's their belief. Also, there's no such thing as sexual morality at all, because sexual morality was a curse given on the world by the demiurge, right? And because the demiurge, this is what they believe, trapped human souls in the material form, which is a great sin, a grave sin. And that's why the trans movement is an expression of Platonics, because they're trying to express the nature of the
transhumanism and technocracy and the future of what they're trying to build for us right now, and everything in it.
This class has a military class. That's the second class, which enforces the will of the king priest class, of course. And then you have the producers, the proletariat, right? But the producers are temporary. The producers need to be the tools of the king priest class to build the world to a certain point until they are no longer necessary. Then we can move forward away from the producers. Now, the producers don't need religion, because their minds are not really capable of understanding sublime understandings of the pleroma, everything that is above the demiurge, right? So they are the profane. They are the profane masses, and once they're done, they're done. Listen, they serve their purpose, and what's best is to free them from their physical bondage that the demiurge placed them in, and to free their spirits to finally be, free of the This is
folks, so Bill Gates, you're saying?
All of them. This is what they all believe.
I know.
Like Maurice Strong, the Club of Rome, Aurelio Pache, all this theosophical stuff, and
the Amigos,
the UN, Alice Bailey, the Lucifer Trust, right? Literally, Lucifer Trust, literally. Okay. So anyway, the point is, all these Gnostic cults, they kind of coalesced in the early 20th century, and they formed what we call now today as the New Age movement. And they formed, that's what Gnosticism is today. And, the climate cult and all of these things find their origin in Platonics, the world of Plato. Now, this stuff existed before Plato. He brings it to us, he says, from Atlantis. Right. So, this is what they're basically trying to rebuild Atlantis. They see themselves as the survivors and the heirs of the greatest people of Atlantis.
There's detachment to that, but I suppose if anybody was to analyze anybody within that crowd was to analyze their own wants, they would probably get to that conclusion themselves. And I think when we're talking about the classic thinkers and the people that you were saying about Marcus Aurelius being an anomaly, well, that kind of thinking outside oneself and thinking outside the the position you're in and seeing things from a different perspective, and really entering into stepping over the borders into contrarianism and examining everything from the opposing angle is the only way to see everything from every angle. I think the majority of people don't even have even a close to having an ability to do that, because it's not taught to them, because these type of teachings are been taken out curriculums all around the world for exactly the reasons to keep us dumb, by exactly the same people who were friends of Maurice Strong and Aurelio Peche and all of those guys. Listen, you've been really frank and honest. Sorry, I always like a pun, but you've been really open, and we talk. I mean, some of what you've said will make some people in my audience say, "Oh my God!" Basically, that's like if you go down the path, then it's like for some people they cannot understand why you would get to that way of thinking unless they have all of the information. And a lot of people don't have all the information. They have a very simple paradigm in their head of a very binary sort of, they bring everybody into good and evil, and it should be so easy to see. But you've been like you having these conversations. They're like, I think about 3 years ago I would have shit myself about having this conversation, having a conversation about Judaism, having a conversation about what's going on in Israel and stuff. That would have been seen like, I think it's just the world is changing, and we're going to have to meet with these challenges, and we're going to have to come to a decision. At the end of it, we're going to have to come to a decision if we want all of the barbarism to stop. And that has to be something that isn't, every time, it can't be unilateral. It can't be Israel acting alone. There's no way that works. There's no way that Israel acting alone will end up with good history to it. It needs to be the world, the actual people who care about like changing something need to actually have some form of power and control, and that just doesn't exist. So if
the world just decided to stop at least either funding the destruction of Israel, right? It doesn't matter what their lip service is.
Yeah, but some of those are evangelical madmen, rich American evangelicals.
I'm not talking about them. They also have their agenda. They also have their agenda. But I'm talking about the Western European, like European UN idea.
And all that
They're the ones who are funding. They want Israel destroyed, and the quisling leadership, the political class of Israel, are working with them to make Israel so hostile that Jews are not going to leave. That's what they don't understand. Oh, this is a very important point. There's just a fundamental reality that exists. It's a cosmic reality, and it's permanent. The Creator wants Jews in the land of Israel. Now, look, I don't claim to know why he wants anything. I don't know why he made the sky blue or the grass green or anything, or why he made anything. But there's a permanent reality that I can't escape, that Jews can't escape, and that certainly anybody else can't escape either. That Jews will be living in God's desire is that Jews to live in this little piece of land. And even if it doesn't make sense to me, or even if it doesn't make sense to a group of Jews out there who want nothing to do with it, you don't understand. God will not leave that alone. He will not allow. God, basically, God's going to get his way.
There's been entire. I just want to say real quick. There's been entire books written on the why. Again, rabbis wrote these books, why we were kicked out to begin with, and the trajectory of how it came to be that finally, after 1900 years, we were allowed back. There's an entire kind of a philosophy kind of behind it. And you can see, no matter what, like we just drew out this whole thing to you about, the religious guys versus non, and these guys came and they didn't want them to come, and then they came, and then there was British there and Arabs and attacks and wars. But you could see throughout all of it, like there's this one kind of thing that's going in a particular direction, whether you want it or not. Like I had it in my personal life when I first came to Israel as an adult in 2007. This is before I was even religious, and I was like, I don't know why, but I'm like literally pulled to be here. And it got to a point where I just decided to go live there. Like, despite all, logic, people were asking me, like, why the hell would you leave essentially a first world country, back then at least, America was, to live in kind of a second world, depending on what city you live in and kind of like what you're doing. And, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, things don't quite work, banks don't quite work. This, you have to fight for everything, whatever it is. I'm not even talking about our enemies. I'm talking about within the country itself. It's developed, but it's not so developed. Like, why? What's wrong with you? I had like, people from my community, the Russian speaking Jews who came to Israel and they would rather be in America. They're like, are you nuts? And I'm just like, you guys don't understand. This is a spiritual thing. I can't explain it. It's like lemmings.
When they come over to America, they usually want to go back because they don't understand their own subconscious spirituality. See, the problem the world is facing is that when you ignore the spiritual reality, there is a spiritual reality. If you don't take that seriously, if you don't understand that that's part of our existence, that's part of the human experience, then this pattern will continue until God just literally steps in at the last moment. According to the Torah, this is a 5,790 year
80. Oh, okay. Yeah.
We're at 50. We're in the year 5,784.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in what type of system is that in?
Torah,
the Jewish calendar.
Yeah. The Jewish. That's when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. That's that's the creation. That's Adam's birthday. Adam Harishon, the first man. He was created on the sixth day, 5,784. And obviously there was a lot of things going on before Adam showed up. And time was different and many things were different, but Adam was created 5,784. And the system as it is now, which we can call it the free will project, where God essentially completely conceals his presence, allows mankind to fully decide, and the creation of evil is only necessary as a device to facilitate free will. So what is evil? It is a choice. It is alternative choice to what he presented as his will in the scripture, right? Mm-hmm. And there needs to be the environment to facilitate choice. But that's not going to go on forever. It's a temporary device. We're at the end of history. I'm sure a lot of people can feel that in one way or another. So we're going to see some kind of intervention very soon.
So is that's where people will always want an answer for time. They'll want to know how long, when, round the corner, is it now?
So it's specifically left vague. Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
And 1,000 years ago, the king, if we would have a king, he would be the king. His name was Maimonides, right? People called him Maimonides. He was the leader of the Jewish people just under 1,000 years ago. And he said he would, they used like certain dramatic language, like, cursed be the one who tries to calculate the end. Yeah, but he lived 1,000 years ago. We're at the end now.
Yeah.
So, and we believe that the Messiah could have come at any point in history if we were to merit it. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there is a cutoff point. There is a fail-safe built into the system, and we're at the end, essentially. Now, people might be asking, Johnny, why the hell are you entertaining the belief system of like religious guys, right? Why don't you go and to like a Star Trek convention and believe there's Klingons there who they've adopted the whole thing, right? So Tzvi was telling you a little bit about how he came to this. I came to this, and this would have to be a willing conversation if you want. I came to this because I had discovered after investigation that the text of the Hebrew scripture, and I discovered this mathematically. Now, I didn't discover this. I saw this data set where the Hebrew scripture could not have been produced by a finite being or any group of finite beings for any period of time. So that's why I wasn't born into this culture. I chose to take it upon myself because I discovered the nature of that document, which we call the Hebrew scripture, how it would be impossible for it to be produced by man or any finite being. The being that would have to be able to produce that particular document would have to be completely unbound by time or space or anything. Now, and because the Torah is mostly math. Now, that part of that aspect of the Torah is almost like nobody is familiar with, right?
I think
people have heard terms like gematria and stuff like that, but that's that's just.
I once read the Bible code back in the day.
So there's a lot of guys who started getting excited about Bible codes, but the people who did the initial work were tremendously famous mathematicians and statisticians and computer scientists who, when I was reading Popular Science magazine, they were having all these debates with secular statisticians, mathematicians, and computer scientists. And I saw some of the photos of their meetings. I'm like, why are serious people talking to like these cavemen looking rabbis? I only later found out that those weren't rabbis. Those guys were also
they're PhDs,
mathematicians and computer scientists. And they were showing how you can, there's a lot of layers and layers and layers of encoded information within the text of the Hebrew scripture. And they would compare it to other texts and show that it was anomalously different.
It was a three-dimensional text in a sense that you could have.
They would remove the spacings of the words, right? And it would just be a sequence of letters as it's found in the Hebrew scripture, right? And then they would do they would do like these interval skips, and they would find very startling information. For example,
was this including the Yitzhak Rabin and the
some of it,
you see, it doesn't. People have this thing like, oh, you can predict the future. No, it's you can only find something which has occurred, but you can find everything that has ever occurred, and it's different than other texts. A person would have to really look into the discussion that's been going on since the late 80s between statisticians to have any chance of having a fair assessment of this. It was a lot of work, but initially that's how I came to it. And I'll give you one example of something that I've seen personally. 1,500, at least 1,500 examples of the following. And this is just one type of code. There's many, many, many different types. So we talked about Maimonides, right? So he lived in the 1100s. Certainly,
back when it was cool back then. That's when
I'm sorry.
Was cool. It was cool back then when you had a big axe and a lever.
He was, well, actually, they say that's not a real picture of him. Like that was a picture of a Turkish merchant, and somebody said that that's what he looked like, but that's not even. We're not exactly sure if that's actually what he looked like. Probably not. But he knew how to. He was a genius. He was a doctor. He knew how to swing a sword. He knew how to fight. He knew how to ride a horse. He knew everything. Anyway, so basically, he was the personal physician to Saladin. It's crazy. Anyway, but he certainly lived after the giving of the Torah. So according to us, the Torah was given as we have it 3,336 years ago. According to the secular academic view, it was put together, Bible critics, right? It was put together by several different authors and over a period of time, but it found its final form 2,400 years ago. That's what academics say. So Maimonides certainly lived way after even the academic view. So there's one section in Leviticus, chapter 11.
That's a saucy book.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get you the exact source like later if you want. But there's a very small, dense piece of the text, scripture, where it shows you his name is encoded as most of the world knows him, the Jewish world, Rambam. That's how we call Maimonides, Rambam. it's an acronym or an acrostic, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. That's his name. So we find, you'd have to learn the Hebrew letters, to know that the R letter and the M letter and the B letter. And then, so you'd find that all those letters had an equal spacing. Okay. And then a little bit lower down, maybe one line, you would find the name of his primary work that he left us. It was an encyclopedia, which is called the Mishneh Torah. That's what he called it. Okay. It was a compilation of all the Jewish laws, all the 613 commandments and how to fulfill them. Okay. He compiled it from the oral tradition. Mishneh Torah. So you find just underneath Rambam, you find Mishnah, the first word, and then lower down on the text, you find the word Torah. Now, in between the first letter of the word Mishnah, which is the first word of the title, and the last letter of the word Torah, there are precisely 613 letters, which is the subject matter of the book. So you have the name of the guy, as he's known famously historically. You have his primary work, and you have the subject matter of the work encoded in a very, very small piece of text. So critics would say, yeah, you could find anything in any text if it was big enough. So they did tests to show that you could find the name Frank if you look for it in Moby Dick, but it'll be like 17,000 letters spacing, and fine, you can do that. But the point is, when you find codes and information in very small areas, that's extremely anomalous mathematically. Yeah. Okay. And not only that, it would be good enough, it would be interesting enough if you just found his name, but then you found his name, his primary contribution, literally, right? And the subject matter sandwiched between the two. It's like, again, it's Mishneh Torah, right? So that's two words. So the Mishnah is like the front cover of the book. The Torah is like the back cover of the book, and then and sandwiched in between the two covers is the content of the book. Furthermore, the actual subject matter of the text where this code is found, it's talking about Moses, who Moses was the leader of his generation. Maimonides was the leader of his generation. Maimonides wrote this book in Egypt, and then Moses is in Egypt in the narrative of the text, and it's talking about, that piece of text is specifically talking about God told Moses to go talk to Pharaoh and tell them that there's going to be the Passover observance, which is the 14th day of the month of Nisan. It's in the text explicitly. That's the Maimonides' birthday. So you have the guy's name, his primary work, the subject matter, and his birthday, all encoded in a very, very so I've seen many, many examples like this and all sorts of other codes. And it took me a long time because I didn't want this to be true. Because I enjoyed, I wanted to, continue dating any kind of girl that I want. I wanted to have every kind of, I would have been like, a libertine, to be kind to myself. Had I not been forced to acknowledge a truth which I found to be true. I don't want to be limited in my lifestyle, and it is a very limiting lifestyle. You're limited. Yeah, you're limited by. You're forced to be conscious of what you eat. You're forced to be conscious of what you say. You're forced to be conscious of the type of relationships that you have, sexual and every other kind of relationship. It is a regulated life. And I didn't want that because I was just a regular American kid.
Johnny, when Frank and I have our podcast, and once in a while we'll utter a curse word, we have these our viewers, some of these.
We're not promoting it.
We're not promoting it.
We're messing up,
It's these ladies who are like in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. Some of them, moved to Israel from usually American ladies who are American who became religious later in life, who live in Israel.
It's always ladies.
Why do you have to curse?
Yeah.
Dr. Zelenko would have cursed. It's
You're-
like becoming of a
you're-
religious man to curse.
I'm according to them, I'm constantly disgracing the name of my holy brother.
Yeah.
And they must have not listened to his interviews because he would curse. But the point is that we have the Jews, we have our church ladies too. Okay?
Oh, goodness gracious.
Oh
my God.
we have our Dana Carvey church ladies.
We have our moralists. We have our all the rest of it.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, the point is that's how I came to it. That's why I take it so seriously. That's why I give it the credence. And honestly, I don't think that there's literally anything else that could have convinced me that God is real, aside from the mathematical perfection, symmetry of the text of the Hebrew scripture specifically, because I don't trust miracles. I don't trust anything. I'm always going to find some excuse for it. Oh yeah, the sea split. Well, it must have been some kind of like tectonic activity that it was just all a coincidence and blah blah blah. And did you ever watch Star Trek? I'm going to shut up after this point right here.
Yeah. I watched a lot of Star Trek.
So the Next Generation, there's one episode where they're called to some kind of agrarian planet that's having chaos, and this planet has a religion.
That's every episode.
No, but this one's interesting because when they get there, they realize that people are having sightings of the devil according to their religion. Like they have a religion there, and so apparently the leader of their planet, their society, made a deal with this devil that they would have 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. At the end of the 1,000 years, the devil would come and collect and create chaos and destruction. So and when they got there, the crew of the Starship Enterprise, they would literally see this devil manifesting in all sorts of ways. And they're trying to understand, how is this possible? Because, Star Trek, they're a bunch of socialists. Okay. Right. So essentially, right. They're like, this can't be real. Okay. So in the end, of course, the people who wrote the script to that episode, it turns out that all of these, and the planet, by the way, was being destroyed. Like there was murmur, there was like tidal waves and all sorts of stuff. So they realized it really wasn't the devil of that planet. It was there was a very sophisticated starship, much more sophisticated than the Starship Enterprise, that was hiding or cloaked in some way somewhere, and it was projecting with all sorts of energy beams, all of these phenomena, right? It was just very sophisticated, very powerful, right? So I'm not a person who would honestly trust even personal revelation. Like if I had some kind of like amazing thing, I'd always be like, maybe I was tripping or something like that. But math is the only thing that would convince me, because I know that math is the way that all information about reality is garnered, is found. Physics and math, that's what doesn't lie. So, and because I found that to be the nature of the text of the Hebrew scripture, so it made me give it a very serious look. And so, anyway, that's just like a side point, because some people might be wondering, like, why?
Frank, I want to add to what you said. So now you have somebody like my father. So now imagine a person who is behind the Iron Curtain, 1976. He's doing a project for university, IT, computer programming, and he's doing something like, and obviously there's no religion is outlawed, and there's no, essentially you're being taught kind of atheistic and materialistic ideas from start from kindergarten up until university. And he's doing a project on random number generators, and he realizes that through his research, he realizes there's no such thing as a random number. There's just a long, very, very infinite string of new digits. Just because we can't figure out what that pattern is, but it is a pattern. Mm-hmm. And so my father this is him telling me this story. I'm already like 14, 15 years old, and he basically is like, he goes to me, he's like, well, I'm like, so what did you do after you found this out? He's like, well, I didn't really know what to do with this information. The only thing that I could conclude was that if there's no such thing as random, then something must have created us. Like, he made that leap. He's like, I didn't know what to do with this information. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that there was all these commandments. I didn't know. He's like, I knew I was a Jew, and there's like, there's like people who don't like us for whatever reason. I knew that, he was 13 years old. He remembers, the war in '67, how they reported it, and how the government was framing, calling Israel the aggressor. It was like this whole kind of geopolitical thing in his mind. And there's the Jews, and they have this land, and that's all kind of what he knew. But religion, all the rest of it. But he was just like, there's no such thing as random. And then, like, he told me he started talking about this thing with his friend, who also kind of started to come to his own conclusions. But again, they had no, just, it's like Abraham, really. I call it Abraham's the Abraham effect. I don't know if you want, whatever you want to call it, but. And then when he came to America,
we described your father is kind of
it's very rare. It's very rare to have these experiences. But what I'm saying is, like, when we came to America, and he just, you start learning about the traditions and all the things you're supposed to do, and he was like, wow, so kind of there's this whole thing to this, and started being traditional and all the rest of it. But when he told me that when I was 14, 15, that kind of got me thinking about just how there's no such thing as random in my life. Like, I connected it automatically to things that were happening in my life, and how there's just kind of like, synchronicity, or a lot of people in the West call it, what do they call it? Serendipity. They use that term, the word.
Yeah.
I didn't have the language for it at the time. I was just kind of like, okay, this is happening, and that's interesting, and that's interesting. There's connection here. There's a connection here. So for like maybe, well into my 20s, I was kind of experiencing that, and I did connect it to what you would call God, but I didn't really start keeping or living any kind of life connected to anything to do with the Torah, again, until I actually learned in detail what this all was, and how to do it, the mechanics of how to do it, and again, the deeper sources and all the rest of it. But yeah, it was a long journey. I mean, for me, and involved Israel as well. But yeah, my father is it's not a lot of people have that experience, especially in like what I call a black hole. It's the Soviet Union. Again, you don't have access to anything. There was a few people that were doing things underground, Orthodox Jews that were keeping things. You had like Moscow, where they kept like a token. The government kept a token synagogue open for people who were coming in to see, oh, we have religion. No, it was just one city, and then everybody else had to do things underground. My grandfather would smuggle like matzah for Passover, and like pillowcases from like little towns in the middle of Ukraine, that there were guys making matzah, stuff like that. Like, there were people like these Chabad guys, Hasidim. They went to I think it was to Uzbekistan, and they were building ritual baths. They were doing Jewish weddings for people, again, underground in people's apartments. My father went to a wedding in Riga, Latvia, of his friend, where it was a little more lax, and it was, granted, that wedding was an apartment, chuppah, wedding canopy, and all the rest of it. These things were like, well, a lot of people didn't have access to these things, especially where we were in Lvov, Western Ukraine. So it's a lot. Everybody has their own. I meet people who also are like us, like me and Frank, who come to it later, and everybody's got their own story, their own journey. Yeah, some people do have these miracle moments where they kind of like, snaps them out of their.
It's usually a slow process of seeing what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, Frank's calling it like maths. I call it just like patterns everywhere that I see that are obvious, that are clear. I mean, I've had one of my best friends is very, very much an atheist. He doesn't believe in really anything. Really, he was brought up religious, but it was a bit too much for him. He was happy to, but he has this fantastic way about him. He's all about love. If you were a religious man, he'd be perfect. He does all of the things that a religious man does, and some people you feel need it, because they need to be able to have someone tell them how to recognize those patterns in their life, that should tell them that there's something more to it all. Because I'm in a struggle. I'm in a point in my life where I've had like extreme experiences that make me go, there is something that is obviously, I mean, some of the information that I found has been given to me in ways that just seem like insane. It's not people. It's things that happen, a collection of events that happen that all link together and cause one moment in the head that means I know where to look for something that I have there's no right to find information, things that are just hidden away. And then it's like my mind's been prepped in through loads of different experiences to take that in. And all of that is like the building up of something that then can recognize patterns, can recognize that. And I completely dig it. I completely dig it because I think as well that that yearning to have like to find the acceptance that something like socialism will give you, like the acceptance into society and as one of this unit, and you've got all of these people who believe the same things and do the same things.
Very religious.
Yeah, but it's also very youthful, like frivolous. Oh, I don't have to work at anything. Everybody's already worked it out for me. So I just do, and then I should be happy. And it's such a lazy young thing to do, and it's so normal for people to go towards traditional later. And I think they're brought there by the recognition that there's patterns all around, and they feel like they are meant to do something at a certain time.
Can I tell you something? Because you mentioned your
okay, but I probably gotta close off in the next. Otherwise, these people are gonna have to listen to a 3 hours podcast. That's gonna be hard for some. They'll be shouting, they'll be screaming.
I want to rail against your atheist friend. I'm just kidding.
Go on,
one thing that I appreciate from what I glean in my I'm no scholar or anything, but in my own personal studies in Torah. I appreciate very much that we're not supposed to emphasize the nature of God, because really that's impossible, right? We're just trying to essentially maintain an awareness of the Creator and some very, very basic ideas, but ultimately we're taught that God will not judge a person by their beliefs, but only almost entirely by their actions. So, and then God Himself he will take care of revealing his true nature to mankind. It's not the job of man to do that. Only God Himself can do that. So your friends, you're saying he's a big sweetheart?
He's the most beautiful person I've ever met in my life.
He's gonna be just fine. And God Himself will introduce Himself. It's not anybody's job to do that.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end and a beautiful outlook to have. And thanks, guys, for coming on and speaking about like so openly. I mean, we've discussed loads. That's a.
We got really Jewy, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I know. I don't mind it. I had a
friend. He's from Golders Green, and he was like a Hasidic guy, and he's sitting there, and this is in Israel, and he's listening to like Metallica, and I'm like, Shmuel, we're not supposed to be listening to Metallica during the religion. He goes, leave me alone with the Jewish stuff. The Hasidic guy. That's the funniest thing. Anyway.
Yeah. Right. Well, guys, I'll put all of the links in the description. Thank you for coming on the News Pace podcast.
Awesome, this was
you're always welcome with us.
This was amazing.
You're beautiful.
We will talk soon.
Right, I'm gonna press the stop button.
Yeah. Come to Florida.
Yeah, I think that stopped recording. Did that stop recording? No,